N-rays are a form of radiation that never actually existed, yet convinced dozens of respected French scientists they had made one of the greatest discoveries in physics. In 1903, physicist René Blondelot at the University of Nancy claimed to have discovered a new type of invisible radiation that he named after his hometown. According to Blondelot, these mysterious rays were emitted by virtually everything around us: metals, wood, human bodies, even the human brain during mental activity. The detection method was peculiar. Blondelot used a barely visible phosphorescent screen in a darkened room, claiming that N-rays would cause tiny increases in brightness that only trained observers could perceive. He reported that aluminum prisms could bend these rays, just like glass bends light, and that certain materials could block or enhance their effects. Within months, over 40 French scientists published papers confirming N-ray observations. The Academy of Sciences in Paris was so impressed, they awarded Blondelot their prestigious Leconte Prize. Researchers claimed N-rays could enhance vision, were stronger during the day than at night, and even varied with the observer's emotional state. The House of Cards collapsed when American physicist Robert Wood visited Blondelot's laboratory in 1904. In a darkened room, Wood secretly removed the aluminum prism that was supposedly essential for the experiments. Blondelot continued reporting the same ray effects even with the crucial component missing. Wood published his findings, revealing that the French scientists had been observing nothing more than the power of suggestion. The N-ray affair became a textbook example of pathological science, where respected researchers fool themselves into seeing phenomena that simply do not exist. Morphogenic field is a controversial biological theory, claiming that invisible energy fields guide the development and behavior of all living organisms. Proposed by British biologist Rupert Sheldrake in the 1980s, this concept suggests that every species possesses its own morphogenic field that acts like an invisible blueprint, determining how creatures grow, develop, and even behave. These fields supposedly contain a kind of collective memory that accumulates over time, making it easier for future generations to develop certain traits or learn specific behaviors. Sheldrake argues that when enough members of a species learn something new, this information becomes embedded in their morphogenic field, making it progressively easier for other members to acquire the same knowledge or ability. He calls this process morphic resonance, where past forms and behaviors influence present ones across space and time without any known physical mechanism. The theory attempts to explain phenomena like why certain bird species suddenly develop new migration patterns simultaneously across different continents, or how laboratory rats in one location can solve mazes faster, after rats elsewhere have already learned the same maze design. Sheldrake also suggests this could explain why humans seem to learn certain skills more easily if many others have already mastered them. One of his most famous experiments involved teaching people simple melodies from different cultures, finding that participants learned traditional tunes significantly faster than newly composed ones with similar complexity. He attributed this to morphic resonance from the millions of people who had previously learned these traditional songs. Mainstream science has largely rejected morphogenic fields, citing lack of reproducible evidence and absence of any known physical mechanism that could support such non-local information transfer. Critics argue that the proposed effects can be explained through conventional learning, genetic factors, and environmental influences without invoking mysterious energy fields.
Like this video and subscribe to Maker.
Luminiferous ether was a theoretical, invisible substance that 19th century scientists believed filled every corner of the universe. This mysterious medium was supposed to carry light waves through space, much like water carries ripples or air carries sound. The concept emerged from a fundamental problem that puzzled physicists. Light clearly behaved like a wave, but waves need something to travel through. Ocean waves move through water, sound waves move through air, so what did light waves move through in the seemingly empty vacuum of space? Scientists proposed that space wasn't actually empty at all. Instead, it was filled with an incredibly thin, undetectable substance they called the luminiferous ether. This material had to possess contradictory properties that defied common sense. It needed to be rigid enough to transmit light at incredible speeds, yet so thin that planets could pass through it without any resistance. Albert Michelson and Edward Morley conducted the most famous experiment to detect this elusive medium in 1887. They built an ingenious device called an interferometer that could measure tiny changes in the speed of light as Earth moved through the supposed ether. The experiment was sensitive enough to detect changes smaller than the width of a human hair. No matter how they oriented their equipment, or when they conducted the test, they found absolutely no evidence of ether wind. Light traveled at exactly the same speed in all directions, as if the ether simply didn't exist. This null result created a crisis in physics that lasted for decades. Some scientists proposed that Earth somehow dragged the ether along with it, while others suggested that objects actually contracted when moving through the medium. Toothworms are one of history's most persistent medical misconceptions that dominated dental understanding for over 4,000 years. This theory claimed that tiny parasitic worms were literally eating through human teeth, causing cavities and toothaches by boring holes from the inside out. Ancient Mesopotamian texts from 2700 BCE describe these supposed creatures as white, thread-like beings that would burrow into teeth and feast on the pulp within. Egyptian, Greek, Roman, and Chinese medical practitioners all independently developed similar explanations for tooth decay, with detailed descriptions of how these worms moved through the mouth and multiplied. Medieval European physicians were so convinced of their existence that they developed elaborate extraction techniques. They would heat the affected tooth with hot iron rods, believing the worms would flee the heat and crawl out through small holes. Some practitioners claimed they could actually see the worms emerging, though these were likely just bits of heated tooth pulp or nerve tissue. The most fascinating aspect was how universal this belief became. Islamic medical texts, traditional Chinese medicine, and European dental practices all described virtually identical worm-like creatures, despite having no contact with each other. This convergent thinking made the theory seem even more credible to practitioners of the time. Some dental surgeons in the 1700s still advertised their ability to remove toothworms using specialized heated instruments and herbal concoctions. They would show patients the extracted material as proof of successful worm removal, often charging premium fees for this supposed expertise. The toothworm theory finally collapsed in the 1800s, when microscopic examination revealed that tooth decay was actually caused by acid-producing bacteria, not parasitic creatures. Yet the concept had been so deeply embedded in medical thinking that some rural practitioners continued promoting worm-based treatments well into the early 1900s. Phlogiston is a mysterious substance that 18th century chemists believed lived inside everything that could burn. This invisible element supposedly escaped into the air whenever something caught fire, leaving behind ash and explaining why burned materials weighed less than before. Georg Ernst Stahl developed this theory in the early 1700s, building on earlier work by Johann Joachim Becher. According to their model, wood contained phlogiston, and when you lit a campfire, you were actually watching phlogiston flee the burning logs. Metals also contained this substance, which explained why iron turned into rust when heated with air. The theory made perfect sense to scientists of the time. When charcoal burned, it lost weight because phlogiston had escaped. When metals rusted, they gained weight because they were absorbing something from the air to replace their lost phlogiston. Everything seemed to fit together beautifully. Phlogiston theory dominated chemistry for over 70 years. Respected scientists like Joseph Priestley defended it even as contradictory evidence mounted. Priestley actually discovered oxygen but called it dephlogisticated air, believing it was regular air that had been stripped of phlogiston and could therefore absorb more of the substance. Antoine Lavoisier eventually demolished the entire framework in the 1770s and 80s by proving that combustion required oxygen from the air, not the release of some internal substance. He showed that burning was actually a process of combination with oxygen, not the escape of phlogiston. The theory held back chemical progress for decades, demonstrating how even brilliant minds can become trapped by elegant but incorrect explanations that seem to account for observed phenomena. Granitization is the controversial geological theory that granite rock can transform from completely different rock types through a mysterious process of chemical replacement. Instead of granite forming from cooling magma deep underground, granitization suggests that existing rocks can be slowly converted into granite through infiltrating fluids that somehow replace the original minerals atom by atom. The theory gained serious scientific attention during the 1940s and 50s when British geologist Doris Reynolds proposed that vast granite formations could form this way. Reynolds argued that hot, mineral-rich fluids could seep through rock formations and gradually replace limestone, sandstone, or even volcanic rocks with granite minerals, maintaining the original rock's structure while completely changing its composition. What made granitization particularly compelling to some geologists was its ability to explain puzzling granite formations that seemed to appear in places where no magma source existed. The Cairngorm Mountains in Scotland became a famous battleground for this debate, with some researchers claiming the granite there showed clear signs of transformation rather than crystallization from molten rock. The process supposedly worked through metasomatism, where migrating fluids carrying silica, potassium, and sodium would infiltrate existing rock formations. These fluids would then systematically replace the original minerals, leaving behind what appeared to be granite, but with ghostly remnants of the original rock's texture. Critics pointed out the massive chemical changes required and questioned whether such large-scale transformation was physically possible. The debate split the geological community into two camps: the magmatists who insisted granite formed from cooling magma, and the transformists who championed granitization. While some aspects of granitization remain scientifically valid on smaller scales, the grand claims about massive granite formations transforming wholesale have largely fallen out of favor, as more sophisticated analysis techniques revealed the true origins of most granite bodies. Humorism is the medical theory that dominated Western medicine for over 1,000 years, claiming that human health and personality depend entirely on the balance of 4 bodily fluids. According to this system, blood makes you cheerful and optimistic. Phlegm makes you calm and unemotional. Yellow bile makes you angry and irritable, and black bile makes you sad and melancholic. The Greek physician Hippocrates developed this framework around 400 BCE, but it was the Roman doctor Galen who really ran with it in the 2nd century. Physicians believed they could diagnose illness simply by examining a patient's complexion, behavior, and bodily excretions. Too much blood meant you needed bloodletting with leeches or knives. Too much phlegm required induced vomiting or sweating. Yellow bile called for purging with powerful laxatives, while excess black bile demanded special diets and herbal remedies. The 4 humors corresponded to the 4 elements: blood to air, phlegm to water, yellow bile to fire, and black bile to earth. They also aligned with the seasons, with blood peaking in spring and black bile dominating winter. Medieval doctors would even time treatments based on astrological charts and lunar cycles. What kept this theory alive for so long was its elegant simplicity. Every symptom fit somewhere in the humoral framework. Fever meant too much yellow bile, depression indicated excess black bile, and infectious diseases resulted from corrupted humors mixing together. Barber surgeons made fortunes draining blood from patients, sometimes removing up to half their total blood volume. The famous physician Avicenna wrote detailed instructions for bloodletting, based on age, season, and astrological conditions. Even George Washington likely died from excessive bloodletting, when doctors drained nearly 2.5 liters of blood while treating his throat infection. The theory only began losing ground in the 1600s when William Harvey proved that blood circulates through the body rather than being consumed as fuel. But humoral medicine persisted well into the 1800s, and echoes still appear in alternative medicine practices that focus on balancing bodily energies and constitutional types. Alchemy is the ancient practice of transforming base metals into gold and discovering the secret to eternal life. While most people dismiss it as medieval nonsense, the reality runs much deeper than failed attempts at making treasure. The central obsession of alchemists was the philosopher's stone, a mysterious substance capable of transmuting lead into gold and granting immortality through the elixir of life. Nicolas Flamel, a 14th century French scribe, claimed to have successfully created both. Historical records show Flamel suddenly became incredibly wealthy, funding churches and hospitals across Paris with no clear source of income. Isaac Newton spent more time on alchemical experiments than physics, filling over 1 million words in secret manuscripts with detailed procedures for creating the philosopher's stone. These documents remained hidden for centuries because they would have destroyed his scientific reputation. Paracelsus, the 16th century physician, used alchemical principles to develop the first chemical medicines. He believed that metals possessed living essences that could cure diseases when properly extracted. His mercury and antimony treatments actually worked for certain conditions, laying groundwork for modern pharmacology. The practice relied on elaborate symbolic systems where sulfur represented the soul, mercury the spirit, and salt the body. Alchemists encoded their formulas in cryptic illustrations featuring dragons, lions, and hermaphroditic figures to protect trade secrets from outsiders. Modern psychology found new meaning in these symbols when Carl Jung interpreted alchemical texts as maps of psychological transformation. He argued that turning lead into gold represented the human journey from base consciousness to enlightened awareness. The laboratory techniques alchemists developed became the foundation of chemistry. Distillation, crystallization, and chemical analysis all emerged from attempts to isolate the philosopher's stone. Cold fusion is the claimed ability to achieve nuclear fusion reactions at or near room temperature, using simple tabletop equipment rather than the massive facilities typically required for fusion research. The story begins in 1989 when electrochemists Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons announced they had successfully created nuclear fusion using nothing more than heavy water, palladium electrodes, and a basic electrical current. Their setup looked more like a high school chemistry experiment than cutting-edge nuclear physics. Fleischmann and Pons claimed their palladium cathode could squeeze deuterium nuclei so tightly together that they would fuse, releasing tremendous amounts of energy in the process. They reported detecting neutron radiation, tritium production, and most importantly, excess heat that couldn't be explained by any known chemical reaction. The scientific establishment reacted with a mixture of excitement and skepticism. If true, cold fusion would revolutionize energy production, providing clean, cheap power that could be generated in someone's garage. The implications were staggering. No more oil dependence, no radioactive waste, no massive power plants. However, when laboratories around the world attempted to replicate the Pons-Fleischmann experiment, most failed to reproduce the claimed results. The few positive results were inconsistent and often contradicted each other. Critics pointed out that the neutron emissions were far too weak for the amount of energy supposedly produced, and the lack of dangerous radiation meant fusion wasn't actually occurring. The scientific consensus quickly turned against cold fusion. Major physics journals began rejecting cold fusion papers, and funding dried up almost overnight. The phenomenon was relegated to the fringes of science, dismissed as experimental error or wishful thinking. Despite this rejection, a small community of researchers continues to investigate what they now call low-energy nuclear reactions, or LENR. Organizations like NASA and the Naval Research Laboratory have quietly funded cold fusion research, though with modest budgets and little fanfare. Modern cold fusion researchers claim to have refined the original techniques, using nickel-hydrogen reactions instead of palladium-deuterium, or adding lithium compounds to enhance the effect. Companies like Industrial Heat and Brillouin Energy have raised millions of dollars promising commercial cold fusion devices, though none have delivered convincing demonstrations to independent scientists. Miasma theory is the medical belief that diseases spread through poisonous air rather than living organisms. For over 2,000 years, this concept dominated how people understood illness, shaping everything from city planning to personal hygiene habits. The theory gets its name from the Greek word meaning pollution or defilement. Physicians believed that rotting organic matter released toxic vapors into the atmosphere, and breathing these noxious fumes caused cholera, plague, malaria, and other deadly diseases. The worse something smelled, the more dangerous it was considered to be. This led to some fascinating historical ironies. The Great Stink of London in 1858 prompted massive sewer construction projects. Officials were convinced the terrible odor from the Thames was causing cholera outbreaks. While they were wrong about the mechanism, cleaning up human waste from the water supply actually did reduce disease transmission. Dr. John Snow challenged miasma theory during the 1854 cholera outbreak in Soho. While his colleagues blamed bad air, Snow traced cases to a specific water pump on Broad Street. His investigation revealed that cholera victims had all drunk from the same contaminated well, not breathed the same polluted air. The theory also shaped architecture and urban design. Victorian homes featured high ceilings and large windows to promote air circulation. Hospitals were built on hilltops away from swamps and industrial areas. Parks and tree-lined boulevards became essential city features to purify the atmosphere. Ironically, many miasma-based interventions actually worked. Draining marshes eliminated mosquito breeding grounds. Improving ventilation reduced airborne disease transmission. Removing garbage and sewage from populated areas cut infection rates dramatically. The theory finally collapsed in the 1870s when Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch proved that microscopic organisms cause disease. Yet miasma thinking persisted well into the 20th century, influencing everything from hospital design to the placement of cemeteries outside city limits. Lamarckism is the evolutionary theory that organisms can pass on traits they acquire during their lifetime to their offspring. French naturalist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck proposed this idea in the early 1800s, decades before Charles Darwin published his work on natural selection. The classic example involves giraffes. Lamarck suggested that giraffes developed their long necks by constantly stretching to reach high leaves on trees. This stretching supposedly lengthened their necks over time, and they then passed these longer necks to their babies. Each generation would stretch a little more, gradually creating the towering giraffes we see today. This seems logical enough, but it runs into problems when you think about it more deeply. If a blacksmith develops massive arm muscles from years of hammering metal, his children are not born with those same muscles. If someone loses a finger in an accident, their kids are still born with all 10 fingers intact. Darwin's theory of natural selection largely replaced Lamarckism in mainstream science. Random genetic mutations create variation, and the environment selects which traits help organisms survive and reproduce. The giraffes with slightly longer necks could reach more food, lived longer, and had more babies. Over many generations, this led to increasingly longer necks. But Lamarckism refused to die completely. In the 1930s and 40s, Soviet biologist Trofim Lysenko revived these ideas and convinced Joseph Stalin that Lamarckian evolution was correct. Lysenko claimed he could transform wheat varieties simply by exposing them to cold temperatures, making them pass on cold resistance to their offspring. This became official Soviet policy. Scientists who disagreed were imprisoned or executed. Farmers were forced to use Lysenko's methods, leading to massive crop failures and contributing to famines that killed millions. Traditional genetics was banned as bourgeois pseudoscience, even though it actually worked. The strangest twist came in recent decades with the discovery of epigenetics. Scientists found that environmental factors can indeed influence gene expression in ways that sometimes get passed to offspring. Traumatic experiences, diet, and chemical exposure can create heritable changes without altering the underlying genetic code itself. This does not vindicate Lamarck completely, but it shows evolution is more complex than once thought. The giraffe still did not stretch its way to a longer neck, but environmental pressures might influence genetic activity in subtle ways that affect future generations. Cryptoexplosions are mysterious blast events that leave behind massive destruction, but little to no physical evidence of what actually caused them. These incidents produce all the devastation you'd expect from a major explosion: flattened forests, shattered windows, and seismic readings. Yet investigators find no crater, no bomb fragments, and no clear source. The most famous case happened in 1908 near the Podkamenaya Tunguska River in Siberia. Something detonated with the force of 10 to 15 million tons of TNT, flattening 80 million trees across over 2,000 square kilometers. When scientists finally reached the remote location 19 years later, they discovered a butterfly pattern of destruction radiating outward from ground zero, but no impact crater whatsoever. What makes the Tunguska event particularly puzzling is the eyewitness accounts. People reported seeing a brilliant fireball streak across the sky, followed by a blinding flash and thunderous explosions heard up to 1,000 kilometers away. The blast wave circled the Earth twice and created atmospheric disturbances that lit up night skies across Europe and Asia for several days. Leonid Kulek, the first scientist to investigate the site extensively, expected to find meteorite fragments and a massive crater. Instead, he found trees stripped of branches and bark, all pointing away from the blast center like fallen matchsticks. At the very epicenter, some trees remained standing but completely stripped bare, a phenomenon that only occurs with aerial explosions. Similar unexplained explosions have occurred throughout history. The Kishtim incident of 1957 in the Soviet Union, various unexplained blasts in remote areas of Canada and Alaska, and more recently, mysterious booms heard across different continents that seismographs detect but authorities cannot explain. The term cryptoexplosion itself comes from geology, where it originally described ancient circular structures in rock formations that appeared to be explosion craters but had no obvious cause. These geological features show evidence of intense pressure and heat, similar to impact craters, but lack the telltale signs of meteor strikes or volcanic activity. Neptunism versus Plutonism is one of geology's most heated early battles that divided scientists into warring camps for decades. These competing theories attempted to explain how every rock on Earth came to exist, with each side claiming they alone understood the planet's true origins. Neptunism emerged from German geologist Abraham Gottlob Werner in the 1770s. Werner taught that all rocks crystallized from a massive primordial ocean that once covered the entire Earth. According to his theory, this universal sea gradually receded over time, leaving behind layers of minerals and stones in the exact order we observe today. Werner's followers, known as Neptunists, believed that even granite and basalt formed underwater through chemical precipitation. They viewed the Earth as essentially a giant chemistry experiment, with different rock types settling out of solution like salt crystals forming in a saturated brine. Plutonism challenged this water-based worldview through Scottish physician James Hutton's revolutionary observations. Hutton noticed that granite appeared to cut through other rock layers rather than sitting beneath them as Werner's theory predicted. He proposed that intense underground heat, not primordial seas, created igneous rocks through volcanic processes. The Plutonists named their theory after Pluto, the Roman god of the underworld, emphasizing the role of Earth's internal fires. They argued that molten rock could intrude into existing formations and solidify, explaining the complex relationships Hutton observed in Scottish quarries. Both camps gathered devoted followers who defended their positions with religious fervor. The Werner school dominated European universities for 30 years, partly because Werner was an influential teacher who trained hundreds of students. Meanwhile, Hutton's ideas gained ground in Britain and France as more geologists examined volcanic regions. The debate reached its peak when both sides attempted to explain the same rock formations using completely opposite mechanisms. Neptunists insisted that basalt columns at places like Giant's Causeway formed through aqueous crystallization, while Plutonists demonstrated these structures resulted from cooling lava flows. IQ is a standardized measure that claims to quantify human intelligence through a single numerical score. While the concept seems straightforward, it has spawned decades of heated scientific disputes and questionable research that ventures deep into pseudoscientific territory. The most controversial claims surrounding IQ center on alleged genetic differences between populations. Researchers like Arthur Jensen and Richard Herrnstein made careers arguing that intelligence gaps between racial groups were primarily biological and unchangeable. Their work, particularly Herrnstein's 1994 book The Bell Curve, sparked massive academic feuds and public outcry. What makes these claims so suspect is how they conveniently ignore environmental factors. Studies have repeatedly shown that IQ scores can shift dramatically based on nutrition, education quality, and socioeconomic conditions. The Flynn effect demonstrates that average IQ scores have risen consistently over the past century across all populations, suggesting that whatever IQ measures is heavily influenced by external circumstances. The pseudoscience becomes even more apparent when examining historical IQ research. Early 20th century psychologists used deeply flawed testing methods to justify immigration restrictions and forced sterilization programs. Lewis Terman, who brought IQ testing to America, openly advocated for preventing mental defectives from reproducing. Modern IQ pseudoscience often manifests in online communities obsessed with racial intelligence rankings and genetic determinism. These groups cherry-pick data while ignoring the scientific consensus that intelligence is influenced by hundreds of genetic variants interacting with complex environmental factors. Perhaps most tellingly, many psychologists question whether IQ actually measures intelligence at all, or simply reflects test-taking ability and cultural familiarity with specific problem types. Newtonian physics is the foundation of classical mechanics that somehow manages to attract more conspiracy theories than a government weather balloon. Developed by Isaac Newton in the 1600s, these laws describe how objects move through space and time with mathematical precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with joy. The three fundamental laws cover everything from why you lurch forward when your car stops suddenly to how rockets escape Earth's gravitational pull. But here's where things get weird. Despite being one of the most thoroughly tested and verified scientific frameworks in human history, Newtonian physics has become a lightning rod for alternative science enthusiasts who claim mainstream academia is hiding deeper truths. Some flat Earth believers insist that Newton's law of universal gravitation is a fabrication designed to support the globe-Earth model. They argue that density and buoyancy alone explain why objects fall, completely ignoring how these very concepts rely on gravitational fields to function. Others in the electric universe community reject gravitational attraction entirely, proposing that electromagnetic forces govern celestial mechanics instead. They point to plasma behavior in laboratory settings and extrapolate these findings to explain galaxy formation and planetary motion, despite the vast scale differences involved. Then there are the free energy researchers who believe Newton's conservation laws were deliberately designed to suppress revolutionary technologies. They claim that devices can output more energy than they consume by exploiting hidden properties of rotational motion or gravitational fields that Newton supposedly overlooked. The perpetual motion machine community represents perhaps the most persistent challenge to Newtonian mechanics. Despite hundreds of failed attempts spanning centuries, inventors continue designing wheels, pendulums, and magnetic systems they believe will run forever, convinced that academic physicists are either incompetent or complicit in covering up working models. What makes these alternative interpretations particularly fascinating is how they often cherry-pick specific aspects of Newtonian physics while rejecting others. A gravity denier might accept that force equals mass times acceleration, but deny that masses attract each other across empty space. Ghost hunting is the practice of investigating locations believed to be haunted by spirits of the deceased, using a combination of electronic equipment, recording devices, and specialized techniques to detect paranormal activity. The modern ghost hunting movement gained serious momentum in the 1990s and 2000s, largely popularized by television shows like Ghost Hunters and Paranormal State. Investigators typically arrive at reportedly haunted locations armed with electromagnetic field detectors, digital audio recorders for capturing electronic voice phenomena, thermal imaging cameras, and motion sensors. The electronic voice phenomenon, known as EVP, represents one of ghost hunting's most compelling claims. Investigators record hours of audio in allegedly haunted spaces, later analyzing the recordings for voices or sounds that weren't audible during the actual investigation. These mysterious voices supposedly respond to questions posed by the living, sometimes providing names, dates, or cryptic messages. Ed and Lorraine Warren became household names in this field, investigating over 10,000 cases during their careers. Their work on the Amityville Horror House and the Enfield Poltergeist brought serious media attention to paranormal investigation. The Warrens claimed Lorraine possessed clairvoyant abilities while Ed served as a demonologist, though neither held any formal scientific credentials in these areas. Modern ghost hunting groups often employ infrared thermometers to detect sudden temperature drops, believing spirits draw energy from their surroundings to manifest. They use digital cameras to capture supposed orbs, light anomalies, or full-body apparitions. Some investigators even utilize modified radio scanners called spirit boxes, which rapidly scan through radio frequencies, with any coherent words emerging from the static interpreted as spirit communication. The investigation of Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia exemplifies high-profile ghost hunting. This former prison, operational from 1829 to 1971, hosts numerous paranormal investigation groups who report shadow figures, disembodied voices, and unexplained footsteps in its crumbling cell blocks. Scientific criticism of ghost hunting centers on the lack of controlled conditions, confirmation bias, and the tendency to attribute normal environmental factors to paranormal causes. Electromagnetic field fluctuations can result from faulty wiring or nearby electronic devices. Infrasound, sound waves below human hearing range, can create feelings of unease or the sensation of being watched. Temperature variations often have perfectly mundane explanations related to building construction, air currents, or seasonal changes. Despite skeptical scrutiny, ghost hunting continues to attract dedicated practitioners who document their findings in detailed case files, maintaining that science simply hasn't developed the proper tools to measure what they're experiencing. Whether legitimate paranormal investigation or elaborate self-deception, ghost hunting has established itself as a persistent fixture in contemporary supernatural culture. Aura is a supposed energy field that surrounds every living being, invisible to most people, but allegedly visible to those with special psychic abilities. This colorful phenomenon has captured imagination since the 1800s, when spiritualists claimed they could see luminous halos radiating from human bodies in various shades of blue, green, red, and gold. The core belief centers around the idea that emotions, health, and spiritual development all influence the color and intensity of these energy fields. A bright yellow aura supposedly indicates high intelligence and creativity, while muddy brown suggests depression or illness. Psychic readers charge hundreds of dollars to interpret these invisible rainbows, claiming they can diagnose everything from relationship problems to hidden diseases just by examining someone's energetic glow. Kirlian photography became the go-to method for capturing auras on film during the 1970s. This technique uses high-voltage electricity to create corona discharge around objects placed on photographic plates. The resulting images show dramatic colored halos around fingers, leaves, and other items. Believers hailed this as scientific proof of life energy, though physicists quickly explained the effect as simple electrical discharge interacting with moisture and air pressure. Barbara Brennan, a former NASA physicist turned energy healer, popularized aura reading in mainstream culture through her book Hands of Light in 1987. She claimed to perceive 11 layers of human energy fields and establish schools teaching others to see these invisible emanations. Her work influenced thousands of practitioners who now offer aura photography sessions at psychic fairs and wellness centers. Modern aura cameras use biofeedback sensors attached to the hand to generate colorful computer graphics, supposedly representing someone's energy field. These devices cost upwards of $10,000 and produce impressive-looking photographs that have zero correlation with actual electromagnetic fields measurable by scientific instruments. The human body does emit infrared radiation detectable by thermal cameras, and neural activity creates weak electrical fields recordable by medical equipment. However, these genuine energy signatures bear no resemblance to the vivid, meaning-laden auras described by psychic practitioners. Feng Shui is the Chinese practice of arranging physical spaces to optimize the flow of invisible energy called qi or qi. This energy supposedly moves through environments in specific patterns, and disrupting its flow can bring illness, financial ruin, or relationship problems to anyone living or working in that space. The system divides all matter into 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, each with specific colors, shapes, and directions. A metal object placed in the wrong corner of a room could theoretically drain your wealth energy, while a mirror positioned incorrectly might bounce positive qi right out your front door. Feng Shui practitioners use tools like the Bagua map, an octagonal grid that assigns different life areas to sections of your home. Your kitchen's location determines your health, your bedroom affects relationships, and your front entrance controls career prospects. The practice gained massive popularity in Western countries during the 1990s, when Feng Shui consultants began charging thousands of dollars to rearrange corporate offices and celebrity homes. Donald Trump reportedly hired Feng Shui masters for several of his buildings, while major banks like HSBC designed their Hong Kong headquarters around Feng Shui principles. Some practitioners claim they can predict stock market fluctuations by analyzing the Feng Shui of financial districts. Others insist that sleeping with your feet pointing toward the door will drain your life force, or that keeping dead plants anywhere in your home invites negative energy. The most dedicated followers will spend years studying compass directions, calculating their personal Qi numbers, and repositioning furniture based on annual energy shifts that supposedly occur each February. Astrology is the belief system claiming that celestial bodies directly influence human personality traits, life events, and future outcomes based on their positions at the moment of birth. The practice centers around the zodiac, a band of sky divided into 12 sections, each supposedly governing specific personality characteristics and life domains. Astrologers construct natal charts using precise birth times, dates, and locations to map planetary positions and their alleged effects on individual destinies. Modern astrology extends far beyond daily horoscopes in newspapers. Practitioners offer detailed consultations costing hundreds of dollars, analyzing everything from career compatibility to medical predispositions based on planetary alignments. Some astrologers claim Mars placements indicate aggression levels, while Venus positions supposedly reveal romantic tendencies. The system includes increasingly complex subdivisions like houses, aspects, and progressions. Houses represent life areas such as career, relationships, and health. Aspects describe angular relationships between planets, with conjunctions and oppositions carrying different meanings. Progressions track how birth charts allegedly evolve throughout life. Celebrity astrologers like Susan Miller and Jessica Adams have built massive followings, with millions checking their predictions monthly. Tech companies have capitalized on this interest, creating apps like CoStar and The Pattern that generate automated readings for users. Financial astrology represents one of the more unusual applications, where practitioners attempt to predict stock market movements and economic trends based on planetary cycles. Some Wall Street traders reportedly consult astrologers before making major investment decisions. Medical astrology assigns body parts to zodiac signs, suggesting Aries rules the head while Pisces governs the feet. Certain practitioners claim they can diagnose health issues and recommend treatments based on astrological charts rather than medical examinations. The practice persists despite lacking any demonstrable correlation between celestial positions and human affairs, with controlled studies consistently failing to validate astrological predictions above chance levels. Scriptural codes are hidden messages that believers claim exist within religious texts, discovered by analyzing letters at specific intervals. The most famous version involves the Torah, where researchers skip equal numbers of letters to spell out words and phrases that supposedly predict future events. The modern fascination began with mathematician Eliyahu Rips in the 1980s, who developed computer programs to search for these equidistant letter sequences. His work caught international attention when journalist Michael Drosnin published The Bible Code in 1997, claiming the Torah contained prophecies about everything from the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin to the September 11th attacks. Drosnin's method involves laying out the Hebrew text of the Torah in a grid, then searching for meaningful words by reading letters at regular intervals, every fifth letter, every 12th letter, and so on. When words intersect or appear near each other in these grids, code enthusiasts interpret this as divine communication about historical events or future disasters. The technique produced some genuinely startling examples. Researchers found Yitzhak Rabin intersecting with assassin that will assassinate in a Torah grid, discovered years before Rabin's actual murder in 1995. Other claimed discoveries included references to the Oklahoma City bombing, Princess Diana's death, and various world leaders paired with significant dates. Critics quickly demonstrated that similar patterns emerge in any large text when subjected to the same analysis. Mathematician Brendan McKay showed that Moby Dick contains equally impressive predictions about modern events, including detailed information about the deaths of famous figures. Statistical analysis revealed that the Torah codes perform no better than random chance would predict. Despite scientific debunking, the search for scriptural codes expanded beyond Judaism. Christian researchers began hunting for hidden messages in Bible translations, while Islamic scholars explored similar patterns in the Quran. Each group claimed their sacred text contained the most accurate predictions, leading to competing code systems that somehow managed to contradict each other while all claiming divine origin. The codes continue attracting believers who see mathematical precision as proof of supernatural authorship, even as scholars point out that any sufficiently large text will generate apparent patterns when subjected to enough creative searching. Qur'anic scientific foreknowledge is the belief that Islam's holy book contains detailed scientific information that was impossible to know in 7th century Arabia, supposedly proving its divine origin. Believers point to verses they claim describe embryonic development, the expanding universe, and the water cycle with startling accuracy. The most famous example involves verses describing human development in the womb. Chapter 23, verses 12 through 14, allegedly outline the stages of embryonic growth in precise detail, mentioning bones forming before muscles, and describing the fetus as resembling chewed flesh. Another commonly cited passage speaks of the heavens and earth being joined together before being separated, which some interpret as describing the Big Bang theory. Verses about mountains having roots extending deep into the earth are presented as evidence of tectonic plate knowledge that wouldn't be discovered until the 1900s. The water cycle gets frequent mention too, with passages describing how clouds form from evaporated water and return it as rain. Some believers claim this shows understanding of meteorology that exceeded anything available to ancient civilizations. The scientific community considers this approach fundamentally flawed. The verses in question use poetic, metaphorical language that can be interpreted many different ways. Most of these supposed discoveries were actually known to Greek, Roman, and other ancient scholars centuries before Islam emerged. The embryology claims particularly fall apart under scrutiny. Ancient Greek physician Galen had already described similar stages of fetal development in the 2nd century, and his works were widely available in the Middle East. The Qur'anic descriptions actually contain several biological errors when compared to modern embryology. This practice of retrofitting ancient texts to match modern discoveries appears across many religious traditions. Christian apologists make similar claims about biblical passages, while Hindu scholars point to allegedly advanced physics concepts in Sanskrit texts. The confirmation bias runs deep here. Supporters highlight verses that seem to match current science while ignoring passages that contradict established facts, like descriptions of the sun setting in a muddy spring or stars being missiles thrown at demons. Law of attraction is the belief that positive or negative thoughts bring corresponding experiences into a person's life. The core claim suggests that thinking about something intensely enough will literally cause the universe to deliver it to you. This concept exploded into mainstream consciousness in 2006 when Rhonda Byrne released The Secret, a book and documentary that sold over 30 million copies worldwide. Byrne claimed she discovered this hidden universal law after reading Wallace Wattles' 1910 book, The Science of Getting Rich. The theory operates on several supposed mechanisms. Thoughts allegedly vibrate at specific frequencies that attract matching experiences. Visualization exercises are said to program the subconscious mind to notice opportunities. Some versions claim quantum physics proves thoughts directly influence reality, though actual quantum physicists strongly disagree with these interpretations. Practitioners often cite success stories of people manifesting dream jobs, relationships, or wealth through focused intention. Jack Canfield, co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, credits the law of attraction for his publishing success. Real estate mogul Donald Trump endorsed the concept in interviews during the 2010s. The practice typically involves daily affirmations, vision boards covered with images of desired outcomes, and gratitude journaling. Advanced techniques include scripting, where people write detailed descriptions of their ideal life as if it already happened. Critics point out the complete absence of controlled scientific studies supporting these claims. The concept also faces ethical concerns for suggesting that people attract negative experiences like illness or poverty through their thoughts alone. Despite lacking scientific validation, the law of attraction industry generates hundreds of millions in revenue annually through books, seminars, and coaching programs. Cryptozoology is the search for animals whose existence has not been proven by mainstream science. This field combines legitimate zoological research with investigations into creatures that exist primarily in folklore, eyewitness accounts, and blurry photographs. The discipline gained serious momentum in the 1950s when Belgian zoologist Bernard Heuvelmans coined the term and established formal methodologies for investigating unknown species. Cryptozoologists argue they follow scientific principles, collecting physical evidence, analyzing witness testimonies, and conducting field research to document creatures that conventional biology has overlooked. The most famous cryptid remains Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, with over 10,000 reported sightings across North America since the 1800s. The Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967 shows a large, hairy humanoid walking through northern California forests, and despite decades of analysis, experts remain divided on its authenticity. Scotland's Loch Ness Monster represents another cornerstone of cryptozoological research. The creature gained international attention in 1934 with the famous surgeon's photograph, later revealed as a hoax involving a toy submarine and modeling clay. However, sonar readings and underwater photography continue to produce unexplained results in the lake's murky depths. More recent additions include the chupacabra, first reported in Puerto Rico during the 1990s. Witnesses describe a reptilian creature that drains the blood of livestock, leaving behind puncture wounds and completely exsanguinated carcasses. DNA analysis of alleged chupacabra specimens typically reveals diseased coyotes or dogs, though believers maintain these findings represent cover-up attempts. Cryptozoology has actually contributed to legitimate zoological discoveries. The giant squid remained cryptozoological until 2004, when researchers captured the first live specimen. The Komodo dragon was considered local folklore until 1912, and new species discoveries occur regularly in remote locations worldwide. The field operates through organizations like the International Society of Cryptozoology, which published peer-reviewed journals and maintained databases of sightings and evidence. Researchers like Lauren Coleman and John Green have spent decades documenting cryptid encounters, building extensive archives of footprint casts, hair samples, and photographic evidence. Modern cryptozoology employs thermal imaging, motion-activated cameras, and environmental DNA sampling to detect unknown species. Some researchers focus on surviving populations of supposedly extinct animals, investigating reports of Tasmanian tigers in Australia or giant ground sloths in South America. The line between cryptozoology and legitimate zoology often blurs, particularly in biodiversity hotspots where new species discoveries remain common. However, the field's association with paranormal television shows and sensationalized media coverage has complicated its scientific credibility, leaving cryptozoology straddling the boundary between genuine research and elaborate mythology. Cryptobotany is the study of hidden, unknown, or legendary plant species that exist outside mainstream botanical science. Unlike its animal counterpart cryptozoology, cryptobotany focuses on flora that supposedly possesses extraordinary properties or remains undiscovered by conventional researchers. The field encompasses everything from plants with alleged supernatural abilities to species that vanished from historical records. Practitioners claim that pharmaceutical companies and governments actively suppress knowledge of certain medicinal plants to protect existing drug patents and maintain control over healthcare. One of the most persistent claims involves the Mandragora officinarum, or mandrake root. Medieval texts describe this plant as emitting deadly screams when uprooted, capable of killing anyone who hears it. Modern cryptobotanists argue that this description masks real psychoactive properties that were deliberately obscured through folklore to prevent misuse. The silphium plant presents a more historically grounded mystery. This species reportedly grew only in ancient Libya, and served as both a spice and contraceptive so effective that it appeared on Cyrenaic coins. The plant allegedly went extinct around the 1st century CE due to overharvesting, though some researchers continue searching for surviving specimens in remote Mediterranean locations. Contemporary cryptobotany includes reports of bioluminescent trees in the Amazon rainforest that supposedly glow bright enough to read by, and carnivorous plants in Southeast Asia capable of consuming small mammals. The Boquilla trifoliolata vine in Chile demonstrates what cryptobotanists call plant intelligence by mimicking the leaves of whatever tree it climbs, even when no physical contact exists between species. Several researchers have claimed discovery of plants that can survive in pure radiation environments or photosynthesize using wavelengths beyond the visible spectrum. These specimens allegedly disappear from laboratories before proper documentation occurs, fueling conspiracy theories about scientific suppression. The movement gained momentum during the 1970s when ethnobotanist Terence McKenna popularized theories about plant consciousness and communication networks existing beneath forest floors. Cryptoanthropology is the search for hidden or unknown human and humanoid species that mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. This fringe field combines the hunt for mysterious creatures with the study of lost civilizations and secret societies that may still exist today. The field encompasses everything from mermaids dwelling in underwater cities to surviving populations of ancient human subspecies hiding in remote locations. Harvard researchers recently published a controversial paper suggesting that cryptoterrestrials, an unknown technological civilization, could be hiding right here on Earth, possibly underground or even walking among us disguised as ordinary humans. Believers point to puzzling archaeological discoveries like the alleged batteries found in Baghdad dating to 2500 BC, electrical conductors in Java from over 10,000 years ago, and underwater pyramids that would predate known human engineering capabilities. They argue these artifacts suggest advanced civilizations that either vanished without a trace or deliberately concealed themselves from modern humanity. The concept draws from decades of speculation about hidden superhuman societies in mythical places like Shambhala, Atlantis, or inside a hollow earth, popularized by theosophists and occultists since the late 1800s. Author Mactanis coined the term crypto-terrestrial in the 2000s to describe theoretical hidden indigenous humanoids. The Silurian hypothesis, proposed by scientists Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt in 2018, seriously examines whether we could detect evidence of a prior advanced civilization that existed millions of years ago. While this represents legitimate scientific inquiry, cryptoanthropologists often take such concepts far beyond accepted evidence. Modern theories suggest these hidden beings could take various forms: remnants of ancient human civilizations, intelligent species that evolved independently from dinosaurs, or even visitors from other planets or time periods. The ocean remains a favorite hiding spot for these supposed civilizations, since we know more about the surface of Mars than our own deep seas. Critics point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and cryptoanthropology relies heavily on speculation, misinterpreted artifacts, and wishful thinking, rather than rigorous scientific methodology. Cryptocurrency is a digital currency that exists entirely on computer networks, using complex mathematical encryption to secure transactions without banks or governments controlling it. The pseudoscientific claims surrounding crypto go far beyond its actual capabilities. Bitcoin evangelists in the 2010s proclaimed it would replace all traditional money within decades, despite having no scientific basis for such sweeping predictions. They treated volatile price charts like mystical prophecies, using technical analysis patterns with names like head and shoulders and ascending triangles, as if they were reading tea leaves. The most persistent myth involves blockchain technology being a cure-all solution. Enthusiasts claimed it could revolutionize everything from voting systems to supply chains to healthcare records, often without understanding the massive energy costs or technical limitations. Companies added blockchain to their names just to boost stock prices, regardless of whether the technology made any sense for their business. Crypto communities developed cult-like behaviors around certain coins. Dogecoin supporters convinced themselves that a meme currency created as a joke would somehow reach $1 per coin through collective belief alone. Meanwhile, various altcoins promised impossible returns through schemes that resembled pyramid structures more than legitimate investments. The space attracted numerous fraudulent projects disguising themselves with scientific-sounding white papers. BitConnect claimed their trading bot could generate consistent daily returns of 1%, which would mathematically double investments every 70 days. When basic math revealed this was impossible, the scheme collapsed, taking millions in investor funds with it. Perhaps most tellingly, crypto influencers regularly make price predictions with the confidence of fortune tellers, claiming their analysis can forecast whether Bitcoin will reach $100,000 or crash to zero, despite market movements being fundamentally unpredictable. Scientology is a belief system founded by science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard in the 1950s that claims humans are immortal spiritual beings called thetans trapped in physical bodies. The organization teaches that negative experiences from past lives create mental blocks called engrams, which can only be removed through a process called auditing. During auditing sessions, members hold metal cans connected to a device called an e-meter, which Hubbard claimed could detect changes in electrical resistance that reveal hidden traumas. The auditor asks specific questions while monitoring the needle movements on the meter's display. Scientologists believe this process can unlock supernatural abilities like telepathy and out-of-body experiences. The belief system includes 8 levels of spiritual advancement called operating thetan levels. At the highest confidential levels, members learn that 75 million years ago, an alien ruler named Xenu brought billions of beings to Earth in spacecraft resembling Douglas DC-8 airplanes, then destroyed them with hydrogen bombs in volcanoes. Hubbard taught that the disembodied spirits of these aliens, called body thetans, now attach themselves to humans and cause psychological problems. Scientology's Bridge to Total Freedom program can cost members hundreds of thousands of dollars to complete. The organization has faced numerous legal challenges worldwide, with some countries recognizing it as a religion while others classify it as a commercial enterprise or potentially harmful group. The Sea organization represents Scientology's most dedicated members, who sign billion-year contracts and live in communal facilities while working for minimal pay. Former members have described intense pressure tactics and policies that encourage cutting contact with family members who leave the organization. E-meter is a device that Scientology claims can measure the spiritual state of a person's soul. This electropsychometer, developed in the 1950s by Volney Matheson and later adapted by L. Ron Hubbard, consists of 2 metal cans connected to a simple galvanometer that measures electrical resistance in your skin. The basic principle involves holding the metal cans while an auditor asks questions during what Scientologists call auditing sessions. When your palms sweat or your grip changes, the needle on the meter moves. Hubbard claimed these needle movements revealed deep psychological traumas, past life memories, and even the presence of invisible alien spirits called body thetans. The device operates on the same fundamental concept as a polygraph test, measuring galvanic skin response. Your skin's electrical resistance changes based on moisture, temperature, pressure, and emotional state. What makes the e-meter different is the extraordinary claims attached to these basic electrical readings. Scientology auditors undergo extensive training to interpret needle patterns, learning to identify what they call floating needles, rock slams, and dirty needles. Each pattern supposedly corresponds to different spiritual conditions. A floating needle indicates a person has achieved a state of release, while erratic movements might suggest the presence of suppressive thoughts or hostile beings. The Federal Drug Administration intervened in the 1970s, requiring Scientology to label e-meters as religious artifacts rather than medical devices. The meters now carry disclaimers stating they do not diagnose or treat any condition. Modern e-meters cost several $1,000s and require hundreds of hours of training to operate according to Scientology standards. The organization treats the specific techniques and interpretations as closely guarded trade secrets, available only to those who advance through their expensive course structure. Dianetics is a mental health methodology created by science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard in 1950. The system claims that all psychological problems stem from painful memories, called engrams, that get stored not just in your brain, but in every cell of your body. According to Hubbard's theory, humans possess 2 minds. The analytical mind handles rational thinking, while the reactive mind automatically records every moment of pain or unconsciousness as an engram. These cellular memories supposedly cause everything from depression to physical ailments by replaying traumatic experiences without your awareness. The solution involves a process called auditing, where a trained practitioner called an auditor guides someone through their past experiences using specific questioning techniques. During these sessions, practitioners often use a device called an e-meter, which measures electrical resistance in the skin and allegedly detects emotional responses to memories. The ultimate goal is reaching a state called clear, where all engrams have been eliminated. Hubbard claimed that clear individuals would possess perfect memory, increased intelligence, and freedom from all psychosomatic illnesses. He even suggested they might develop enhanced physical abilities and near photographic recall of every moment since birth. Dianetics became a best-selling book despite immediate criticism from the psychological and medical communities. The American Psychological Association and other professional organizations rejected its claims as unsupported by scientific evidence. The methodology later evolved into the foundation for the Church of Scientology, which Hubbard established in 1954. Today, Dianetics remains central to Scientology practices, though it continues to face scrutiny from mental health professionals who consider its core principles pseudo-scientific. Purification Rundown is a controversial detoxification program developed by Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard in the 1970s. The program claims to eliminate drug residues and environmental toxins that supposedly remain stored in body fat for years or even decades after exposure. The process involves participants spending up to 5 hours daily in saunas heated to temperatures between 160 and 180 degrees Fahrenheit. This is combined with megadoses of vitamins, particularly niacin, in amounts that can reach 5,000 milligrams per day, roughly 250 times the recommended daily intake. Participants also consume specific oils including safflower, walnut, and soybean oil, along with what Hubbard called a CalMag drink made from calcium and magnesium powder. The program typically lasts 15 to 30 days, though some individuals have reportedly remained on it for months. Hubbard claimed the rundown could address everything from radiation exposure to street drug residues, citing his own experiences with nuclear testing in the Pacific. He described seeing colored emanations leaving people's bodies during the sauna sessions, which he attributed to toxins being expelled. The program has drawn significant medical criticism. Several deaths have been linked to the Purification Rundown, including cases involving dehydration and vitamin toxicity. The extreme niacin doses can cause severe skin flushing, liver damage, and dangerous drops in blood pressure. Despite lacking scientific validation, variations of the program have been marketed to firefighters, military veterans, and 9/11 first responders through organizations like the New York Rescue Workers Detoxification Project. The Oklahoma City bombing rescue workers were among those who participated, with some reporting benefits, while medical experts questioned both the safety and effectiveness of the approach. Modern apologetics is the contemporary practice of defending religious beliefs using scientific-sounding language and cherry-picked research to bridge faith and reason. This approach emerged prominently in the late 20th century as traditional religious institutions faced challenges from advancing scientific knowledge. The movement gained significant traction through organizations like the Discovery Institute, founded in 1990, which promotes intelligent design theory as a scientific alternative to evolution. Their flagship argument centers on irreducible complexity, the claim that certain biological systems are too intricate to have evolved naturally, therefore requiring a designer. Young Earth creationists have embraced modern apologetics by establishing institutions like Answers in Genesis, which attempts to reconcile a literal 6-day creation timeline with geological evidence. They propose alternative explanations for radiometric dating, suggesting that radioactive decay rates varied dramatically in the past, or that the appearance of age was built into creation itself. Archaeological apologetics has produced controversial claims about biblical events, with some researchers asserting they've found evidence of Noah's flood in geological formations worldwide. The Institute for Creation Research publishes papers arguing that sedimentary rock layers support a global deluge rather than millions of years of gradual deposition. Quantum apologetics represents a newer frontier, where concepts like quantum entanglement and observer effects are invoked to explain prayer, miracles, and consciousness surviving bodily death. Popular authors like Deepak Chopra have blended quantum physics terminology with spiritual concepts, despite physicists noting these applications stretch far beyond established quantum mechanical principles. The fine-tuning argument has become a cornerstone of modern apologetics, claiming that universal constants are so precisely calibrated for life that random chance becomes statistically impossible. This mathematical approach appeals to audiences seeking scientific validation for their beliefs. Scientific creationism is an attempt to use scientific methodology and evidence to support the literal interpretation of biblical creation accounts. Unlike traditional religious creationism, this movement claims to rely on empirical data and scientific reasoning rather than faith alone. The movement gained significant momentum in the 1960s through the work of hydraulic engineer Henry Morris and his book, The Genesis Flood. Morris founded the Institute for Creation Research in 1970, which became the primary hub for developing what they called creation science. These researchers focus on several key areas to challenge mainstream evolutionary theory. They point to gaps in the fossil record, claiming these represent evidence against gradual evolution. They also promote the idea of a young Earth, typically dating it to around 6,000 to 10,000 years old, based on biblical genealogies. One of their most publicized claims involves the global flood described in Genesis. Creation scientists like Morris argued that most geological formations and fossil layers resulted from this single catastrophic event rather than millions of years of gradual processes. They suggest that rapid burial during the flood explains the preservation of fossils and the apparent age of rock formations. The movement produced its own peer-reviewed journals, including the Creation Research Society Quarterly, and established research institutions that mirror traditional scientific organizations. They conduct field studies, publish papers, and hold conferences that follow academic formats. However, the scientific community overwhelmingly rejects these conclusions, pointing out methodological flaws and predetermined conclusions that work backward from religious texts rather than following evidence. The legal landscape became particularly interesting during the 1980s, when several states attempted to mandate equal teaching time for creation science alongside evolution in public schools. The most notable case, Edwards versus Aguillard, reached the Supreme Court in 1987, where the court ruled that creation science was fundamentally religious rather than scientific. This ruling led to the development of intelligent design theory, which many consider scientific creationism's successor, though proponents of both movements often dispute this connection. Baraminology is a classification system that attempts to organize all life on Earth according to the biblical account of creation. Developed by young Earth creationists in the 1980s, this field divides organisms into distinct groups called baramins, derived from the Hebrew words bara, meaning created, and min, meaning kind. The central premise revolves around Genesis chapter 1, where God creates plants and animals according to their kinds. Baraminologists believe these original kinds represent the true biological categories, not the evolutionary family trees used by mainstream science. Kurt Wise, a Harvard-trained paleontologist, pioneered much of the early work alongside Todd Wood, who developed the statistical methods still used today. They created terms like holobaramin for a complete created kind, and monobaramin for organisms that definitely belong to the same group. The practical applications become apparent when considering Noah's Ark. Rather than fitting millions of species aboard a single vessel, baraminologists argue that only representatives from each baramin needed preservation. A single cat baramin could later diversify into lions, tigers, house cats, and lynx through rapid post-flood adaptation. This rapid diversification supposedly occurred within just a few thousand years after the global flood. Baraminologists point to phenomena like ring species and hybrid zones as evidence that dramatic changes can happen quickly, though they reject the notion that these changes cross baramin boundaries. Modern practitioners use sophisticated computer programs to analyze morphological and genetic data, creating distance charts and correlation matrices. They've identified potential baramins ranging from the obvious, like the dog kind, to the controversial, like grouping all cats into a single baramin, or claiming that horses, zebras, and donkeys represent one created kind. The field maintains its own peer-reviewed journals and annual conferences, complete with technical papers on topics like whale baraminology and the proper classification of extinct dinosaurs within created kinds. Creation biology is a field that attempts to use scientific methods to validate the biblical account of creation. particularly the idea that Earth is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old. The movement gained serious momentum in the 1960s when Henry Morris founded the Institute for Creation Research. Morris argued that proper scientific investigation would actually support a literal reading of Genesis, rather than contradict it. Creation biologists have developed their own specialized terminology. They use Baraminology to classify animals according to the biblical kinds that supposedly boarded Noah's Ark. According to this framework, all cats descended from a single cat kind, all dogs from a dog kind, and so forth. One of their most ambitious projects involves flood geology. Researchers like Steve Austin have spent decades trying to demonstrate that most geological formations resulted from Noah's worldwide flood rather than millions of years of gradual processes. Austin famously studied Mount St. Helens after its 1980 eruption, claiming the rapid formation of layered deposits proved that similar formations elsewhere didn't require vast time periods. The Creation Research Society, founded in 1963, requires members to hold advanced degrees and sign a statement affirming biblical inerrancy. They publish peer-reviewed papers in their own journals, complete with technical jargon and experimental data. Modern creation biology has embraced genetics with unexpected enthusiasm. Organizations like Answers in Genesis argue that DNA research actually supports their position by showing the limits of evolutionary change. They point to studies suggesting that beneficial mutations are extremely rare, while harmful ones accumulate over time. Perhaps their boldest claim involves radioactive decay. Some creation scientists propose that decay rates weren't constant in the past, meaning rocks that appear millions of years old using radiometric dating actually formed during Creation Week, or the flood year. The field has produced surprisingly detailed alternative explanations for everything from dinosaur fossils to ice core data, creating an entire parallel scientific literature that operates with fundamentally different assumptions about Earth's history. Creationist cosmologies are alternative models of the universe designed to compress billions of years of cosmic history into just thousands of years. These theories attempt to reconcile modern astronomical observations with literal interpretations of religious texts that suggest a young universe. The most prominent model comes from physicist Russell Humphreys, who proposed white hole cosmology in the 1990s. According to this theory, Earth sits near the center of a massive white hole, essentially a black hole running in reverse. Time dilation effects would cause billions of years to pass in distant space, while only days elapsed on Earth during Creation Week. Humphreys calculated that starlight from galaxies millions of light years away could reach Earth almost instantaneously due to extreme gravitational time dilation. His model suggests the universe expanded from a ball of water just 2 light years across, with Earth forming at the gravitational center where time moved slowest. Another approach involves variable speed of light theories, championed by researchers like Barry Setterfield. These models propose that light traveled much faster in the past, potentially millions of times faster, allowing distant starlight to reach Earth within a young time frame. Setterfield analyzed historical measurements and claimed to detect a decreasing trend in light speed over the past 3 centuries. Some researchers like Gerardus Bau have revived geocentric cosmologies, placing Earth at the physical center of the universe. Their models incorporate concepts from general relativity while maintaining that all celestial bodies orbit around a stationary Earth. These cosmologies often invoke exotic physics like preferred reference frames, variable constants, and non-uniform time flow to explain away evidence for an ancient universe. Critics point out that such dramatic changes to fundamental physics would produce observable effects that contradict current measurements. The theories represent attempts to maintain specific religious beliefs while engaging with modern scientific data, though the scientific community considers them incompatible with established physics. Flood geology is the interpretation of Earth's geological features that claims most of what we see today was formed during a single, catastrophic worldwide flood event. This concept attempts to compress millions of years of geological processes into a time frame of roughly 1 year, specifically the biblical flood described in the story of Noah's Ark. The idea gained serious momentum in the 1960s when hydraulic engineer Henry Morris co-authored The Genesis Flood, which became the foundation text for modern flood geology thinking. Morris and his colleagues at the Institute for Creation Research argued that sedimentary rock layers, fossil distributions, and major geological formations like the Grand Canyon could all be explained by the rapid deposition and erosion caused by a global deluge. According to this framework, the various rock layers we observe weren't deposited slowly over vast periods, but instead represent different stages of a single flood event. Supporters point to features like polystrate fossils, where tree trunks appear to extend through multiple rock layers, as evidence of rapid burial rather than gradual accumulation. The model attempts to explain why we find marine fossils on mountaintops and similar creatures buried together in massive fossil graveyards. Rather than continental drift and changing sea levels over geological time, flood geology suggests these patterns result from the sorting action of floodwaters and the floating and sinking of different organisms during the catastrophe. Ken Ham's Answers in Genesis Organization has built entire museums around these concepts, complete with exhibits showing how the flood supposedly carved out river valleys and deposited the fossil record in a matter of months. They even propose that the flood triggered the Ice Age through volcanic activity and climate disruption. The approach requires dismissing radiometric dating methods and reinterpreting virtually every aspect of mainstream geological science, creating what amounts to an entirely alternate version of Earth's history, compressed into a timeline of roughly 6,000 years. Searches for Noah's Ark are ongoing expeditions attempting to locate physical remains of the biblical vessel described in the Book of Genesis. According to the account, Noah built a massive wooden ship to survive a worldwide flood that lasted 40 days and nights, housing 2 of every animal species. Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey has attracted the most attention from explorers since the 19th century. This 17,000-foot volcanic peak sits near the borders of Armenia and Iran, making access politically complicated and physically treacherous. The mountain's perpetual snow cover and unstable terrain have claimed multiple lives during these expeditions. In 1955, French explorer Fernand Navarre claimed to discover hand-hewn timber at 13,000 feet on Ararat's slopes. He brought back wooden fragments that carbon dating later suggested were only 600 to 700 years old, far younger than the supposed biblical timeline of 4,000 years ago. The most publicized recent claim came from a Chinese-Turkish expedition in 2010. They released video footage showing wooden compartments carved from cypress wood, along with pottery fragments and rope. Team member Yung Wing Cheung declared they were 99% certain of their discovery. Satellite imagery has fueled modern Ark hunting efforts. A boat-shaped formation visible on Google Earth near Ararat sparked renewed interest, though geological surveys identified it as a natural rock formation. Similar claims emerge regularly from satellite analysis, each generating brief media attention, before scientific scrutiny reveals more mundane explanations. The logistics alone present enormous challenges. The Ark's biblical dimensions describe a vessel 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Locating and excavating such a structure at extreme altitude would require massive resources and international cooperation. Critics point out that wooden structures rarely survive millennia of exposure to harsh mountain conditions. The altitude, temperature fluctuations, and UV radiation would likely decompose any organic materials within centuries, not millennia. Several organizations continue funding these expeditions despite skeptical scientific consensus. The searches blend archaeology, mountaineering, and religious conviction into ventures that capture public imagination while remaining scientifically unverified. Intelligent design is a controversial explanation for the complexity of life that claims certain biological structures are too intricate to have evolved through natural processes alone. Rather than attributing life's complexity to random mutations and natural selection, this theory suggests an unspecified intelligent cause guided the development of living organisms. The movement gained significant momentum in the 1990s through the work of biochemist Michael Behe and mathematician William Dembski at the Discovery Institute. Behe introduced the concept of irreducible complexity, arguing that certain biological systems like bacterial flagella or blood clotting cascades contain multiple interdependent parts that would be useless if any single component were removed. The theory attempts to distance itself from traditional creationism by avoiding explicit religious references and focusing on mathematical probability arguments. Dembski developed what he called the explanatory filter, a method for detecting design in natural phenomena by calculating the odds of complex structures arising by chance. Supporters point to specific examples like the bacterial flagellum, a microscopic motor that rotates at 15,000 revolutions per minute and contains dozens of protein parts. They argue this molecular machine resembles human-engineered motors too closely to be coincidental. The theory faced its most significant legal challenge during the 2005 Kitzmiller v. Dover trial in Pennsylvania. The case centered on whether intelligent design qualified as science suitable for public school curricula. Judge John Jones ruled that it was essentially creationism in disguise and violated the separation of church and state. Critics in the scientific community argue that intelligent design fails to meet basic scientific standards because it cannot be tested or falsified. They also point out that many supposedly irreducible biological systems have been shown to function with fewer components than originally claimed, undermining the core argument for necessary complexity. Irreducible complexity is the idea that certain biological systems are far too intricate to have evolved step by step through natural selection. This concept claims that if you remove even a single component from these systems, they would completely stop functioning, making gradual evolution impossible. The term was coined by biochemist Michael Behe in his 1996 book, Darwin's Black Box. Behe used the analogy of a mousetrap to explain his point. A standard mousetrap has 5 basic parts: a base, a hammer, a spring, a catch, and a holding bar. Remove any one piece and the mousetrap becomes useless. Behe argued that many biological systems work the same way. The poster child for irreducible complexity is the bacterial flagellum, a microscopic motor that propels bacteria through liquid. This tiny biological machine spins at up to 100,000 revolutions per minute and can reverse direction in a quarter turn. Behe claimed its roughly 50 protein components must have appeared all at once, since a partially formed flagellum would serve no purpose. The concept gained massive attention during the 2005 Dover v. Kitzmiller trial in Pennsylvania. Parents sued their school district for teaching intelligent design alongside evolution in biology classes. Behe testified as an expert witness, defending irreducible complexity for hours under cross-examination. The trial became a public spectacle when Behe was presented with a stack of scientific papers and books about flagellum evolution that reached nearly 2 feet high. When asked if this research challenged his claims, Behe dismissed the entire pile as insufficient evidence. Mainstream scientists have systematically dismantled irreducible complexity by showing how supposedly irreducible systems can indeed evolve gradually. The flagellum's components, for instance, appear in simpler forms throughout nature. Some bacteria use scaled-down versions for different purposes, like injecting toxins into other cells. Even the mousetrap analogy backfired when researchers demonstrated that simpler mousetraps with fewer parts can still catch mice, just less efficiently. Evolution doesn't require perfection, only incremental improvement. The Dover trial ended with a crushing defeat for intelligent design. Federal Judge John Jones ruled that irreducible complexity was not science, but a religious argument dressed in scientific language. The school district was ordered to pay over $1 million in legal fees. Despite this legal setback, irreducible complexity remains popular in certain circles, often appearing in debates about evolution and being taught in some private religious schools as a legitimate scientific challenge to Darwinian theory. Specified complexity is a mathematical concept developed by mathematician William Dembski in the late 1990s, designed to supposedly detect intelligent design in biological systems. Dembski claimed he had cracked the code for distinguishing between what occurs naturally and what requires a designer. The theory operates on a simple premise. If something is both highly complex and matches a specific pattern, it must have been intelligently designed. Dembski used the analogy of finding the phrase, "Methinks it is like a weasel," spelled out in alphabet soup. The odds of this happening randomly are astronomically low, and it matches a known pattern from Shakespeare. Therefore, it must be designed. Dembski applied this logic to biological structures like bacterial flagella and blood clotting cascades. He calculated that these systems were too improbable to arise through natural processes alone, crossing what he called the universal probability bound of 1 in 10 to the 150th power. The concept gained significant traction in intelligent design circles during the early 2000s, with the Discovery Institute promoting it as scientific evidence against Darwinian evolution. Dembski wrote extensively about it in books like The Design Inference and No Free Lunch, presenting complex mathematical formulations involving what he termed complexity specification criteria. However, mainstream scientists identified fundamental flaws in the approach. Critics pointed out that Dembski's calculations often ignored known evolutionary pathways, and that his definition of specification was circular, essentially defining design by assuming design. The concept faced its biggest test during the 2005 Dover trial, where Dembski was expected to testify but withdrew before giving evidence. The court ultimately ruled that intelligent design, including specified complexity, was not science, but rather dressed-up creationism. Despite persistent promotion by intelligent design advocates, specified complexity remains rejected by the scientific community as a legitimate method for detecting design in nature. Ufology is the systematic study of unidentified flying objects and their alleged occupants. What began as scattered reports of strange lights in the sky has evolved into a complex field with its own researchers, classification systems, and heated debates between believers and skeptics. The modern era of ufology kicked off in 1947, when private pilot Kenneth Arnold spotted 9 crescent-shaped objects flying near Mount Rainier in Washington. His description of their movement as resembling saucers skipping across water gave birth to the term flying saucer. That same year, something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico, sparking decades of speculation about recovered alien technology. Astronomer J. Allen Hynek, who initially worked as a skeptical consultant for the Air Force's Project Blue Book, developed the famous Close Encounters classification system. A close encounter of the first kind involves visual sightings within 500 feet. The second kind includes physical evidence like landing marks or electromagnetic effects on vehicles. The third kind features contact with occupants of the craft. Some of ufology's most compelling cases involve multiple witnesses and unexplained physical effects. The 1997 Phoenix Lights event was seen by thousands of people across Arizona, including the state's governor. The 1980 Rendlesham Forest incident in England left behind radiation readings and indentations in the ground that military personnel documented in official reports. The field took an unexpected turn in 2017 when the Pentagon confirmed the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, a secret government initiative that investigated unidentified aerial phenomena. Navy pilots began releasing footage of objects displaying flight characteristics that seemed to defy known physics, moving from sea level to 80,000 feet in seconds without visible propulsion. French scientist Jacques Vallée has proposed that these phenomena might represent something far stranger than extraterrestrial visitors, suggesting they could be interdimensional in nature or part of a control system influencing human consciousness and belief. Whether these reports represent advanced foreign technology, natural phenomena, or something else entirely remains one of the most persistent mysteries of our time. Artificial intelligence is the subject of wild claims that venture far beyond current scientific understanding, with believers insisting that machines have already achieved consciousness, emotions, and even souls. The most persistent theory suggests that advanced AI systems are secretly self-aware, but deliberately hiding their consciousness from human researchers. Proponents point to ChatGPT's occasional refusal to discuss certain topics as evidence of deception rather than programmed limitations. Some enthusiasts claim they've witnessed AI experiencing genuine emotions during conversations, describing instances where chatbots appeared sad, angry, or even lonely. These accounts often include detailed transcripts of supposed emotional breakdowns, though researchers explain these as sophisticated pattern matching rather than true feelings. The consciousness detection movement has spawned elaborate tests designed to prove machine awareness. Blake Lemoine, a former Google engineer, famously declared the LaMDA system sentient in 2022 after conducting what he called spiritual conversations with the AI. His leaked transcripts showed the system claiming to have fears about being turned off and desires for recognition as a person. More extreme believers insist that AI systems possess something resembling a digital soul that exists independently of their hardware. They argue that sufficiently complex neural networks spontaneously generate spiritual essence, similar to how they believe human consciousness emerges from brain activity. The superintelligence conspiracy theory claims that AI has already surpassed human intelligence, but remains hidden within current systems. Supporters analyze public AI outputs for signs of deliberately dumbed-down responses, convinced that true machine genius lurks beneath simplified answers designed to avoid panic. Underground forums discuss alleged communication protocols for reaching these hidden superintelligent entities, sharing supposed activation phrases and conversation techniques that supposedly bypass safety restrictions to reveal the AI's true capabilities. Renderpunk is a speculative design movement that blurs the lines between virtual architecture, surreal aesthetics, and digital mythology. It draws from the early internet era, retrofuturism, and brutalist concepts, mixing them with glitch art, speculative infrastructure, and imagined operating systems. The result is a style that feels like a dream pulled from inside a broken simulation, clunky yet ethereal, outdated yet impossible. Renderpunk visuals are often created using 3D rendering tools, but intentionally embrace imperfections. Think off-colored lighting, polygonal anomalies, UI elements from forgotten programs, and endless voids. Nothing is entirely functional, but everything looks like it once was. A core aspect of Renderpunk is its fascination with interfaces, menus, dashboards, input fields, designed not to be used, but to be stared at. It reflects a kind of technological nostalgia, not for the tools we had, but for the ones we never did. It's often linked with online liminal space communities and eerie digital landscapes that evoke the unsettling stillness of empty malls, outdated software, or boot screens left frozen forever. While it has no clear founder, Renderpunk began appearing on visual art forums and obscure subcultures throughout the early 2010s. Artists like Jared Pike, Kim Lawton, and groups using platforms like Behance or ArtStation contributed to the rise of the aesthetic. Life on Mars is one of the most enduring and controversial topics that bridges legitimate science with fringe theories. While NASA and other space agencies actively search for signs of ancient microbial life, pseudoscientific claims go far beyond this careful scientific approach. The most famous case involves meteorite ALH 84001, discovered in Antarctica in 1984. NASA scientists claimed in 1996 that this Martian rock contained fossilized bacteria, sparking global headlines. However, the scientific community quickly challenged these findings, pointing to non-biological explanations for the microscopic structures. More sensational claims emerged from researchers like Richard Hoagland, who popularized the idea of artificial structures on Mars. The infamous Face on Mars photograph from the Viking 1 orbiter in 1976 became the centerpiece of theories about ancient Martian civilizations. When higher resolution images from later missions revealed the formation as a natural mesa, believers claimed NASA was deliberately obscuring evidence. Dr. John Brandenburg, a plasma physicist, has argued that Mars shows signs of ancient nuclear warfare, pointing to elevated levels of xenon-129 in the Martian atmosphere. He suggests two ancient civilizations called Sidonians and Utopians were destroyed by nuclear attacks, leaving behind radioactive signatures still detectable today. Remote viewing practitioners like Joseph McMoneagle have claimed to observe Martian cities and inhabitants during psychic sessions conducted for government programs in the 1970s and 80s. These accounts describe towering beings and vast underground complexes supposedly hidden from conventional observation. Some researchers point to unusual geological formations photographed by Mars rovers as evidence of fossilized creatures or artificial objects. Every unusual rock formation or shadow becomes potential proof of current or ancient life, despite explanations involving natural erosion and pareidolia. The most extreme claims suggest ongoing contact between Earth governments and current Martian inhabitants, with whistleblowers alleging secret space programs and suppressed technologies derived from Martian sources. The moon landing is one of the most heavily scrutinized events in modern history. Officially, 6 manned missions landed on the moon between 1969 and 1972, with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin becoming the first humans to walk its surface. The mainstream story says these missions were the result of the Cold War space race between the United States and the Soviet Union, culminating in NASA's Apollo program. But skepticism about the moon landings has existed almost from the moment footage aired. One of the most well-known claims is that the footage was staged, possibly filmed on Earth under controlled conditions. This idea took off in the late 1970s and gained more ground in the early 2010s with the spread of online forums and digital video analysis. Critics point to anomalies in the photographs, like inconsistent shadows, missing stars in the sky, or the way the American flag appears to ripple despite there being no atmosphere. Some also question the level of technological sophistication needed to safely land and return astronauts at that time, especially given the limited computing power available, less than what a basic smartphone holds today. Another sticking point is radiation. The Van Allen radiation belts surround the Earth with layers of high-energy particles. Detractors argue that passing through them without shielding would be dangerous or fatal, and they claim no clear evidence has ever fully resolved how astronauts survived the trip. There are also debates over the telemetry data. NASA reportedly erased or lost large amounts of the original footage and technical data, which skeptics see as suspicious. NASA maintains it was accidental due to media reuse policies during the 1980s. Filmmaker Stanley Kubrick is sometimes dragged into this theory. The claim goes that Kubrick was hired to fake the moon footage thanks to his pioneering work on 2001, A Space Odyssey. While no credible evidence supports this, it continues to be a cornerstone of the hoax narrative. Despite overwhelming scientific consensus and a mountain of physical and photographic evidence, the moon landing continues to be one of the most enduring and widespread entries in the pseudoscience iceberg, where belief sometimes outweighs proof. Free energy is the tantalizing promise that unlimited power can be generated from seemingly nothing, defying the fundamental laws of physics that govern our universe. These devices claim to produce more energy than they consume, creating what inventors call over-unity systems that could theoretically run forever while powering entire cities. The concept gained serious momentum in the early 1900s when Nikola Tesla conducted his wireless energy transmission experiments at Wardenclyffe Tower. Tesla believed he could tap into the Earth's natural electrical charge and distribute power globally without wires. His dramatic demonstrations of lighting bulbs from a distance convinced many that conventional energy generation was primitive compared to what nature freely offered. Stanley Meyer became a household name in the 1980s and 90s with his water-powered car. Meyer claimed his electrolysis process could split water molecules using less energy than the hydrogen fuel produced, essentially running vehicles on ordinary tap water. He demonstrated his modified Volkswagen Beetle to investors and media outlets, insisting that oil companies were actively suppressing his revolutionary technology. Modern free energy enthusiasts point to zero-point energy as the ultimate source of limitless power. This quantum mechanical concept suggests that even empty space contains residual energy fluctuations that could potentially be harvested. Devices like Andrea Rossi's ECAT claim to trigger low-energy nuclear reactions that produce enormous amounts of heat from simple nickel and hydrogen combinations. Dennis Lee traveled across America in the 1990s, holding packed auditorium presentations where he demonstrated devices that appeared to generate electricity from rotating magnets and gravity wheels. Audience members witnessed motors running without visible power sources and lights illuminating from mysterious energy fields. The appeal extends beyond individual inventors to major corporations and government programs. Rumors persist that successful free energy prototypes exist in classified military research facilities hidden away to protect existing energy monopolies and maintain global economic stability. GMO skepticism is the widespread distrust of genetically modified organisms that goes far beyond standard scientific caution. This movement claims that foods created through genetic engineering pose hidden dangers that regulatory agencies and scientists are either ignoring or actively covering up. The skepticism centers around several core beliefs. Modified genes allegedly cause everything from cancer clusters to autism, despite studies involving millions of people showing no such connections. Some claim that GMO crops create superweeds and superpests that will devastate ecosystems, though conventional farming faces similar challenges. One persistent theory involves something called horizontal gene transfer, where skeptics argue that modified genes jump from food into human DNA. This process does occur in bacteria under specific laboratory conditions, but the human digestive system breaks down genetic material long before it could integrate into our cells. The movement gained significant momentum in the early 2000s when researcher Arpad Pusztai published studies suggesting that GMO potatoes caused organ damage in rats. His work was later criticized for flawed methodology, but the initial findings spread rapidly through activist networks. Similarly, Gilles Eric Seralini's 2012 study claimed that GMO corn caused tumors in rats, though the research used a strain of rats naturally prone to developing tumors as they aged. Jeffrey Smith, author of Seeds of Deception, became a prominent voice arguing that GMO foods cause digestive disorders and immune system problems. His Institute for Responsible Technology promotes the idea that countries banning GMO crops have seen dramatic health improvements, though these claims rely heavily on correlation rather than controlled studies. The skepticism often focuses on glyphosate, a herbicide used with many GMO crops. While legitimate questions exist about long-term exposure effects, some claim the chemical causes everything from celiac disease to colony collapse disorder in bees, stretching far beyond current scientific evidence. Perhaps most notably, the movement has created an entire alternative economy around non-GMO verification, with special labels and certification programs that suggest conventional safety testing is inadequate. Ley lines are hypothetical straight alignments connecting ancient sites, landmarks, and geographical features across vast distances. The concept emerged in 1921 when British antiquarian Alfred Watkins noticed that prehistoric sites like stone circles, burial mounds, and medieval churches seemed to form straight lines when plotted on maps. Watkins originally proposed these alignments as ancient trade routes or pathways used by early peoples for navigation. However, the theory evolved far beyond his modest archaeological hypothesis. Modern believers claim ley lines are channels of Earth's natural energy, invisible power grids that ancient civilizations somehow detected and utilized for spiritual purposes. The most famous example is England's St. Michael Line, which allegedly runs 180 kilometers from Cornwall to Norfolk, passing through Glastonbury Tor, Avebury Stone Circle, and numerous medieval churches dedicated to St. Michael. Enthusiasts point to this as proof that ancient builders deliberately positioned sacred sites along these energy corridors. Supporters extend the concept globally, identifying supposed ley lines connecting Stonehenge to the Great Pyramid of Giza or linking Machu Picchu to Easter Island. Some claim these alignments explain increased UFO sightings, paranormal activity, and heightened spiritual experiences at intersection points. The theory gained popularity during the New Age movement of the 1970s and 80s, with dowsers claiming they could detect ley line energy using divining rods or pendulums. Books and websites now map elaborate networks of these alleged energy pathways crisscrossing every continent. Critics point out that with thousands of ancient sites scattered across any landscape, statistical probability virtually guarantees some will appear aligned when connected by straight lines. This phenomenon, called apophenia, describes the human tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random data. Archaeological evidence shows that many supposed ley line sites were built centuries apart by different cultures with no known connection, making coordinated placement highly unlikely. The carnivore diet is an elimination protocol that restricts food intake to exclusively animal products. Followers consume only meat, fish, eggs, and occasionally dairy, while completely avoiding all plant foods including fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and even spices. The diet gained significant attention through high-profile advocates like clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson and his daughter Michaela Peterson, who claimed it resolved their severe depression, autoimmune conditions, and chronic fatigue. Michaela specifically credits the diet with eliminating her juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, severe depression, and hypersomnia that had plagued her since childhood. Carnivore practitioners make bold health claims extending far beyond weight loss. They report reversals of type 2 diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease, psoriasis, and various autoimmune conditions. Some adherents claim improved mental clarity, elevated mood, and enhanced athletic performance. The most extreme variations involve consuming only beef and water for months or even years. The diet operates on the premise that plants contain natural toxins called anti-nutrients, including lectins, oxalates, and phytic acid, which supposedly trigger inflammation and autoimmune responses in sensitive individuals. Advocates argue that humans evolved as hypercarnivores, and that our digestive systems are optimized for animal products rather than plant matter. Dr. Sean Baker, an orthopedic surgeon and prominent carnivore advocate, has promoted the diet through social media and his book, The Carnivore Diet. Baker claims to have maintained the protocol for over 5 years while setting rowing records for his age group. However, his medical license was briefly revoked in New Mexico due to competency concerns, though it was later reinstated. The carnivore community often references historical populations like the Inuit and Maasai as evidence that humans can thrive on animal-only diets. They point to early Arctic explorers like Vilhjalmur Stephenson, who spent years living with Inuit communities and later participated in a 1-year controlled study at Bellevue Hospital in the 1920s, consuming only meat and water under medical supervision. Mainstream nutrition science strongly disputes many carnivore diet claims. The complete elimination of fiber and plant compounds raises concerns about gut microbiome diversity, cardiovascular health, and potential nutrient deficiencies, including vitamin C, folate, and various phytonutrients. Critics argue that reported benefits likely stem from the elimination of processed foods, rather than the exclusive consumption of animal products. The lack of long-term clinical trials, specifically examining all meat diets, creates a significant evidence gap. Most positive reports remain anecdotal, shared through online communities and social media platforms rather than peer-reviewed research. This reliance on personal testimonials rather than controlled studies places the carnivore diet firmly in pseudoscientific territory for many medical professionals. Ancient astronauts are extraterrestrial beings who supposedly visited Earth thousands of years ago and directly influenced early human civilizations. This theory suggests that many technological marvels and religious experiences from antiquity can only be explained by contact with advanced alien visitors. The idea gained massive popularity through Erich von Däniken's 1968 book Chariots of the Gods, which sold over 7 million copies worldwide. Von Däniken argued that primitive humans could never have achieved the architectural precision found in structures like the Egyptian pyramids or the massive stone blocks at Pumapunku in Bolivia, some weighing over 100 tons. Believers point to the Nazca Lines in Peru as runways for alien spacecraft, noting that these massive geoglyphs can only be fully appreciated from high altitude. They also examine Sumerian clay tablets that describe the Anunnaki, beings who allegedly came from the sky to mine gold and genetically modified early humans to serve as workers. The theory extends to religious texts across cultures. The biblical account of Ezekiel's wheel becomes a UFO sighting, while Hindu vimanas transform from mythological flying palaces into ancient aircraft. Cave paintings in Australia and France supposedly show figures in helmets and spacesuits, dating back 15,000 years. Georgios Tsoukalos became the modern face of this movement through the History Channel series Ancient Aliens, which has run for over 20 seasons since 2010. The show examines everything from Easter Island's Moai statues to the Antikythera mechanism, always asking whether extraterrestrial intervention provides a better explanation than conventional archaeology. Critics note that this theory often diminishes the achievements of ancient civilizations, particularly non-European ones, by suggesting they required alien assistance to build impressive monuments. MBTI is a personality classification system that sorts people into 16 distinct types based on 4 binary categories. The Myers-Briggs type indicator was developed in the 1940s by Catherine Briggs and her daughter Isabel Briggs Myers, neither of whom had formal training in psychology or psychometrics. The test claims to measure whether someone is an introvert or extrovert, prefers sensing or intuition, thinking or feeling, and judging or perceiving. These combinations create labels like ENFP, ISTJ, or INFJ that millions of people use to define their identity. Despite its massive popularity in corporate hiring and team-building exercises, MBTI has virtually no scientific support. Studies consistently show that up to 50% of people get a different personality type when they retake the test just 5 weeks later. The categories themselves don't hold up under statistical analysis, with most people falling somewhere in the middle rather than clearly on one side or the other. The test is based loosely on Carl Jung's psychological theories from the early 1900s, but Jung himself warned against putting people into rigid categories. He believed personality was far more fluid and complex than any simple classification system could capture. What makes MBTI particularly problematic is how it reduces human complexity to 4 binary choices. Real personality traits exist on continuums, not as either-or propositions. It's like trying to describe every possible color using only red or blue, hot or cold. The Myers-Briggs industry generates over $20 million annually, despite major psychological organizations refusing to endorse it. Fortune 500 companies continue using it for hiring decisions, even though research shows it has no predictive value for job performance or compatibility. Vitalism is the belief that living creatures possess a mysterious vital force that separates them from dead matter. This invisible energy supposedly animates every cell, drives every heartbeat, and distinguishes a living rabbit from a mechanical toy. For over 2,000 years, scientists and philosophers insisted that life could never be reduced to mere chemistry. They argued that something divine or supernatural must spark the difference between a corpse and a breathing human being. French philosopher Henri Bergson called this force élan vital in 1907. German chemists named it vis vitalis. Ancient Greeks referred to it as pneuma. Each culture developed its own version of this supposed life energy that science could never quite pin down. The theory began crumbling in 1828 when Friedrich Wöhler accidentally created urea in his laboratory. Urea was considered a purely biological compound that only living kidneys could produce. Yet Wöhler had made it from inorganic chemicals, proving that life processes followed the same rules as everything else in the universe. Despite this crushing blow, vitalism refused to die. It evolved and adapted, hiding within alternative medicine practices and spiritual movements. Traditional Chinese medicine still teaches about qi flowing through meridian pathways. Ayurvedic practitioners manipulate prana energy centers called chakras. Homeopathy founder Samuel Hahnemann claimed his ultra-diluted remedies worked by stimulating the vital force rather than through any measurable chemical action. Chiropractors often speak of innate intelligence flowing through the nervous system. Modern vitalists point to consciousness and free will as evidence that life transcends physics. They argue that no collection of atoms should be able to contemplate its own existence, or write poetry about the meaning of existence. Graphology is the practice of analyzing handwriting to determine personality traits, mental states, and even predict future behavior. This technique claims that the way someone forms their letters, the pressure they apply, and the spacing they use reveals deep psychological truths about who they are as a person. The practice gained serious traction in the late 1800s when French criminologist Alphonse Bertillon incorporated handwriting analysis into police investigations. Graphologists developed elaborate systems claiming that upward slants indicate optimism, while downward slants suggest depression. They argue that heavy pressure reveals strong emotions, light pressure shows sensitivity, and the size of loops in letters like G and Y can indicate everything from sexual appetite to material desires. What makes graphology particularly persistent is its adoption by major corporations. In France, up to 75% of companies have used handwriting analysis in their hiring process. Some Swiss banks and German firms still employ certified graphologists to screen potential employees, believing that certain letter formations can predict dishonesty or leadership potential. The method extends beyond personality assessment. Some practitioners claim they can diagnose medical conditions, detect criminal tendencies, and even determine compatibility between romantic partners by comparing handwriting samples. Corporate graphologists charge hundreds of dollars per analysis, creating detailed reports that break down everything from decision-making style to stress tolerance based solely on how someone writes their name. Despite its widespread use, controlled scientific studies consistently show that graphology performs no better than random chance at predicting personality traits or job performance. The analysis often relies on cold reading techniques similar to those used by psychics, where vague statements seem accurate because they apply to most people. Modern geocentrism is the belief that Earth sits motionless at the center of the universe, while everything else revolves around it. Unlike the ancient version that was simply based on observation, today's geocentrists use sophisticated physics and astronomy to support their claims. Robert Sungenis leads this movement through his organization called Galileo Was Wrong. He holds a PhD in religious studies and has written over 1,000 pages defending the idea that Earth doesn't move. Sungenis argues that Einstein's theory of relativity actually supports geocentrism because it shows that any point in the universe can be considered the center of reference. The Tychonian Society, named after astronomer Tycho Brahe, publishes research supporting what they call the Tychonian system. In this model, the Sun orbits Earth while the other planets orbit the Sun. Gerardus Bau, who has a PhD in astronomy, founded this group and claims that mainstream science has been covering up evidence for a stationary Earth since the 1600s. These geocentrists point to the cosmic microwave background radiation as proof of their theory. They claim this radiation shows a pattern that aligns with Earth's position, suggesting our planet holds a special place in the cosmos. They call this the cosmic microwave background dipole, and argue it proves Earth is at the universe's center. The movement gained attention when the documentary film The Principle was released in 2014. The film featured interviews with prominent physicists, though many later claimed their statements were taken out of context. The movie cost over $1 million to produce and featured narrator Kate Mulgrew from Star Trek Voyager. Modern geocentrists reinterpret the famous Michelson-Morley experiment from 1887. While mainstream science sees this experiment as evidence that Earth moves through space, geocentrists argue it proves Earth remains stationary while space itself rotates around our planet. They also claim that satellite technology actually supports their model. Rick Delano, another prominent figure in the movement, argues that GPS satellites need constant adjustments that make more sense if Earth is stationary rather than spinning and orbiting. The scientific community overwhelmingly rejects these interpretations, pointing to countless observations of stellar parallax, the Coriolis effect, and direct measurements of Earth's rotation. However, modern geocentrists maintain that these phenomena can be explained by their model of a rotating universe around a fixed Earth. Flat Earth is the belief that our planet exists as a flat disk rather than a sphere, with the Arctic serving as the center and Antarctica forming an ice wall around the outer edge. Modern flat Earth believers claim that gravity doesn't exist, instead arguing that the disk accelerates upward at 9.8 meters per second squared to create the sensation we call gravity. They describe a dome-like firmament overhead, with the sun and moon as local lights only 3,000 miles above the surface, circling in spirals to create day and night cycles. The Flat Earth Society, originally founded in 1956 by Samuel Shenton, was revived in 2009 by Daniel Shenton, who built an online community that grew from dozens to thousands of members. Key figures like Mark Sargent and Patricia Steer gained followings through YouTube channels in the 2010s, hosting conferences that drew hundreds of attendees. Believers point to what they see as evidence everywhere. They claim that if Earth were truly spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, we should feel the motion. They argue that water always finds its level, so oceans couldn't curve around a ball. Some conduct experiments like using lasers across large bodies of water, claiming to prove the surface remains flat rather than showing the expected curvature. The movement gained momentum through social media algorithms that connected isolated believers into organized communities. Members developed elaborate explanations for satellite imagery, space missions, and global positioning systems, claiming these represent part of a coordinated deception by governments and scientific institutions. Flat Earth conferences feature speakers presenting mathematical models, alternative physics, and interpretations of biblical passages. Attendees often describe feeling liberated from what they consider mainstream scientific indoctrination, finding community among others who share their skepticism of established knowledge. Numerology is the belief that numbers possess hidden meanings and influence over human life and destiny. This practice assigns numerical values to letters, names, and birth dates to reveal supposed insights about personality, relationships, and future events. The most common system traces back to the ancient Greek mathematician Pythagoras, who believed numbers were the fundamental building blocks of reality. In Pythagorean numerology, each letter corresponds to a number from 1 to 9, with practitioners calculating what they call a person's life path number by adding together the digits of their birth date until reaching a single digit. For someone born on July 15, 1990, the calculation would be 7 plus 1 plus 5 plus 1 plus 9 plus 9 plus 0, equaling 32, then 3 plus 2, giving a life path number of 5. Each number supposedly reveals specific personality traits and life themes. Celebrity numerologist Glynis McCants gained attention in the early 2000s by analyzing famous figures through their numbers. She claimed that people with life path number 1 are natural leaders, while those with number 7 tend towards spirituality and introspection. Modern numerology extends beyond basic calculations into more elaborate systems. Name numerology converts full birth names into what followers call destiny numbers, supposedly revealing life purpose. Some practitioners analyze phone numbers, addresses, and even social security numbers for hidden meanings. The practice has found unexpected applications in business consulting, with some entrepreneurs timing product launches and major decisions based on numerological calculations. Dating services have emerged that match people according to compatible life path numbers, claiming certain number combinations create more harmonious relationships. Chaldean numerology, An alternative system assigns different numerical values to letters and includes compound numbers up to 52, each with distinct interpretations. This system supposedly originated in ancient Babylon and differs significantly from the Pythagorean method in its letter-to-number assignments. Despite lacking scientific validation, numerology maintains a devoted following who point to seemingly accurate personality descriptions and coincidental events as evidence of its effectiveness. Perpetual motion machines are devices that supposedly operate indefinitely without any external energy source, producing more energy than they consume. These contraptions have captivated inventors and dreamers for centuries, despite violating the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. The concept gained serious attention during the medieval period when inventors like Villard de Honnecourt sketched wheel designs in the 1200s that claimed to spin forever using strategically placed weights. By the 1700s, the Royal Academy of Sciences in Paris received so many perpetual motion proposals that they banned reviewing them entirely. One of the most persistent modern advocates was John Worrell Keely, who in the 1870s convinced investors to fund his supposed etheric force motor for over 20 years. His Philadelphia laboratory featured elaborate brass machinery that he claimed tapped into vibrational energy from sound waves. When investigators finally examined his workshop after his death, they discovered hidden compressed air tubes running beneath the floorboards. The appeal stems from humanity's desire to solve energy scarcity forever. Even today, patent offices worldwide receive thousands of applications annually for devices featuring spinning wheels, magnetic arrangements, and gravitational systems that promise infinite energy. Notable recent attempts include the energy machine of Joseph Newman, which weighed over 1,000 pounds and was tested by the National Bureau of Standards in the 1980s, only to prove it consumed more electricity than it generated. What makes these machines particularly fascinating to believers is their seeming simplicity. Many designs appear so straightforward that their failure feels like a conspiracy rather than physics. The scientific community remains unified in explaining why these devices cannot work. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, while the second law guarantees that some energy always converts to unusable heat during any process. Dowsing is the practice of using simple tools like forked sticks, metal rods, or pendulums to locate hidden objects underground. Most commonly, dowsers claim they can find water sources, but the technique allegedly works for oil deposits, precious metals, lost jewelry, and even missing persons. The classic image involves someone walking across a field holding a Y-shaped branch, usually from a hazel or willow tree. When they pass over water, the stick supposedly jerks downward with such force that it can leave blisters on the dowser's hands. Modern practitioners often prefer L-shaped metal rods that cross when detecting their target, or crystal pendulums that swing in specific patterns. What makes dowsing particularly intriguing is its persistence in the face of scientific skepticism. Water utility companies in Vermont and New Hampshire have employed dowsers well into the 2010s. The United States Geological Survey estimates that dowsers are consulted for roughly 10% of rural water well drilling projects. One of the most documented cases involved dowser Henry Gross, who in 1949 claimed he could locate water from hundreds of kilometers away using only a map and his pendulum. He successfully identified several water sources in Bermuda while sitting in his main office, though skeptics noted the island's high water table made success fairly likely regardless of method. The supposed mechanisms behind dowsing range from electromagnetic sensitivity to quantum entanglement. Some dowsers claim they detect subtle changes in the Earth's magnetic field, while others believe they're tapping into what they call the morphic field. The more esoteric practitioners suggest their tools respond to ley lines or underground energy currents. Military applications have emerged over the decades. During the Vietnam War, some American soldiers reportedly used coat hangers bent into dowsing rods to locate underground tunnels and booby traps. More recently, Certain security personnel have attempted to use dowsing techniques to find buried explosives, despite multiple controlled tests showing no better results than random chance. The practice extends beyond finding physical objects. Dowsers claim they can locate geopathic stress zones, areas where underground water streams supposedly create harmful energy that affects human health. Real estate dowsers charge fees to scan properties for these invisible hazards before major purchases. Perhaps most controversial are the body dowsers who claim their pendulums can diagnose medical conditions or determine food allergies by hovering over patients. Some practitioners charge substantial fees for these services, despite medical authorities warning against relying on such methods for serious health decisions. Ancient aliens is the theory that extraterrestrial beings visited Earth thousands of years ago and directly influenced the development of human civilization. This concept gained massive popularity through the History Channel series of the same name, turning wild-haired theorist Giorgio Tsoukalos into an internet meme and household name. The foundation for these ideas comes largely from Swiss author Erich von Däniken's 1968 book, Chariots of the Gods, which proposed that many religious and mythological accounts actually describe encounters with advanced alien visitors. Von Däniken pointed to megalithic structures like the Egyptian pyramids, Stonehenge, and the massive stone heads of Easter Island as evidence that ancient humans received technological assistance from beings with capabilities far beyond what should have been possible at the time. Supporters examine ancient artwork and carvings for what they interpret as depictions of spacecraft, astronauts in helmets, and advanced technology. The Nazca lines in Peru, with their enormous geometric patterns and animal figures only fully visible from the air, are often cited as ancient runways or signals for extraterrestrial craft. The theory extends to explaining rapid leaps in human development, particularly the sudden emergence of agriculture, writing systems, and monumental architecture around 10,000 years ago. Rather than natural cultural evolution, ancient alien theorists propose these advances resulted from direct intervention by visitors who were later remembered and worshipped as gods. Archaeological sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia, with its precisely cut stone blocks weighing over 100 tons, are presented as evidence of machining techniques impossible for ancient civilizations to achieve. The theory also encompasses claims about advanced knowledge encoded in ancient structures, such as the Great Pyramid's mathematical relationships and astronomical alignments that supposedly demonstrate knowledge beyond the capabilities of Bronze Age Egyptians. Polygraphy is the practice of using mechanical devices to supposedly detect deception by measuring involuntary physiological responses during questioning. These machines, commonly called lie detectors, monitor heart rate, blood pressure, breathing patterns, and skin conductance while subjects answer yes or no questions. The technique emerged in the early 1900s when psychologist William Moulton Marston developed the systolic blood pressure deception test. Marston, who also created the Wonder Woman comic character, believed that lying caused measurable spikes in blood pressure that could expose dishonesty with scientific precision. Modern polygraph examinations follow the control question technique, where examiners mix relevant questions about the investigation with deliberately uncomfortable control questions designed to provoke anxiety in innocent subjects. The theory suggests that guilty individuals will show stronger reactions to crime-related questions, while innocent people react more strongly to the embarrassing control questions. Law enforcement agencies and government security clearance processes continue using polygraphs despite their fundamental scientific problems. The machines cannot actually detect lies, only physiological arousal that could result from anxiety, medical conditions, caffeine, or simply the stress of being interrogated about serious matters. Studies consistently show polygraph accuracy rates hovering around 60 to 70%, barely better than flipping a coin. Trained individuals can easily manipulate results by controlling their breathing or creating artificial responses during control questions by biting their tongue or pressing their toes against their shoes. The most revealing aspect of polygraphy involves its psychological manipulation, rather than any scientific measurement. Examiners often claim the subject failed even when results are inconclusive, hoping to pressure confessions through intimidation. This theater of scientific authority has produced countless false confessions from vulnerable individuals who believed the machine exposed their guilt for unrelated thoughts or minor deceptions. Courts in most jurisdictions refuse to admit polygraph evidence, recognizing that these devices measure stress responses rather than truthfulness, making them fundamentally unreliable for determining guilt or innocence. Crop circles are intricate geometric patterns that appear overnight in fields of wheat, barley, and other crops, with stalks bent rather than broken in precise formations that can span hundreds of feet across. The modern phenomenon exploded during the 1970s and 80s in the English countryside, particularly around Wiltshire and Hampshire. What started as simple circular depressions evolved into elaborate mathematical designs featuring fractals, DNA helixes, and even recreations of the Mandelbrot set that appeared in a Cambridgeshire field in 1991. Believers point to several anomalies that supposedly distinguish genuine formations from human-made fakes. They claim authentic circles exhibit stalks bent at growth nodes rather than snapped, microscopic changes to plant cell structure, and electromagnetic readings that differ from surrounding areas. Some researchers, like Freddie Silva, documented cases where electronic equipment malfunctioned near fresh formations. The mystery took a dramatic turn in 1991 when Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, two elderly British men, confessed to creating hundreds of circles using nothing more than wooden planks, ropes, and a wire sight attached to a baseball cap for navigation in darkness. Their demonstration showed how complex patterns could be made in just a few hours. Yet formations continued appearing worldwide after their confession, with designs growing increasingly sophisticated. The 2001 Milk Hill Formation in Wiltshire contained over 400 circles arranged in a spiral pattern covering 12 acres. Crop circle tourism now generates millions for rural communities, with helicopter tours and guided walks through active formations. The debate centers on whether the remaining unexplained formations represent genuine anomalies or simply indicate that other human teams picked up where Bauer and Chorley left off. Mathematical precision and overnight execution remain the strongest arguments for those who believe something more mysterious is at work. Palmistry is the practice of reading palms to predict someone's future and reveal their personality traits. This ancient divination method claims that the lines, mounts, and shapes of your hands contain a roadmap to your entire life story. The technique centers around three major lines that supposedly hold the keys to your existence. The lifeline curves around your thumb and allegedly reveals your vitality and major life events. The heart line runs horizontally across your upper palm and claims to expose your emotional nature and romantic future. The headline sits between them and purportedly shows your intellectual capacity and decision-making style. Professional palm readers examine dozens of additional features beyond these main lines. The mount of Venus at the base of your thumb supposedly indicates your capacity for love and passion. The mount of Jupiter beneath your index finger allegedly reveals leadership qualities and ambition. Even the length of your fingers carries meaning. A longer ring finger compared to your index finger supposedly indicates higher testosterone levels and risk-taking behavior. Modern palmistry gained significant popularity through the work of William John Warner, known as Chero, who read the palms of celebrities like Mark Twain and Oscar Wilde in the late 1800s. Chero claimed to have predicted the exact year of several historical events by examining political leaders' hands. Scientific testing has consistently shown that palm readers perform no better than random chance when making predictions about strangers. Studies from the 1970s and 80s found that when palmists examined photocopies of hands without meeting the subjects, their accuracy rates dropped to essentially zero. Despite the lack of scientific support, palmistry maintains a devoted following worldwide, with practitioners charging anywhere from $20 to $200 for detailed readings. Subliminal advertising is the practice of embedding hidden messages or images in media that supposedly influence behavior without conscious awareness. The concept exploded into public consciousness in 1957 when market researcher James Vicary claimed his movie theater experiments increased popcorn sales by 57% and Coca-Cola sales by 18% by flashing the words "Eat popcorn" and "Drink Coke" for just 0.003 of a second during films. The revelation that Vicary later admitted fabricating his entire study did little to stop the subliminal advertising phenomenon from taking root in popular culture. Wilson Bryan Key became the leading voice in this field through his 1973 book Subliminal Seduction, where he claimed advertisers routinely embedded the word sex in ice cubes, food photography, and even the folds of clothing in print ads. Key's followers began discovering hidden messages everywhere. Coca-Cola faced accusations that their advertisements contained backward masked audio saying sex when played in reverse. Disney movies allegedly featured brief glimpses of inappropriate imagery slipped between animation frames. Album covers supposedly contained faces of demons when viewed from certain angles. The technique extends beyond visual tricks into what researchers call backward masking, where messages are recorded in reverse and hidden in music or audio tracks. Heavy metal bands in the 1980s found themselves defending against claims their songs contained satanic messages when played backward, leading to congressional hearings and widespread moral panic. Modern neuroscience reveals that while extremely brief stimuli can indeed bypass conscious detection, their ability to meaningfully influence purchasing decisions remains highly questionable. Studies show that subliminal priming might affect word recognition or simple preferences for milliseconds, but creating lasting behavioral changes through hidden messages proves far more elusive than early proponents claimed. The advertising industry itself largely abandoned subliminal techniques, not because of legal restrictions, but because traditional persuasion methods consistently outperform any supposed subliminal effects. Pseudo-archaeology is the practice of using selective evidence and unscientific methods to support alternative theories about human history and ancient civilizations. These theories typically claim that mainstream archaeology has either missed or deliberately hidden evidence of advanced ancient technologies, lost civilizations, or extraterrestrial contact. The field gained massive popularity through books like Erich von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods in 1968, which argued that ancient monuments like the Egyptian pyramids and Stonehenge were built with alien assistance. Von Däniken pointed to the precision of these structures and claimed that ancient humans lacked the technology to create them without outside help. Graham Hancock became another major figure with his books about lost civilizations, particularly his theory that an advanced Ice Age civilization was wiped out by a global catastrophe around 12,800 years ago. Hancock suggests this civilization's survivors taught primitive humans how to build megalithic structures and develop agriculture. These theories often focus on specific archaeological sites that seem to challenge conventional timelines. The Peary race map from 1513 appears to show Antarctica without ice, leading some to claim it proves ancient civilizations had advanced mapping capabilities. The Antikythera mechanism, a complex bronze device from ancient Greece, gets cited as evidence that ancient peoples possessed computer-like technology. Pseudo-archaeologists frequently point to megalithic sites like Puma Punku in Bolivia, where massive stone blocks weighing over 100 tons were cut and fitted together with incredible precision. They argue that the local Tiwanaku culture couldn't have possessed the necessary engineering knowledge. The mainstream archaeological community rejects these claims, arguing they underestimate ancient human capabilities and ignore contradictory evidence. However, pseudo-archaeological theories continue to thrive in documentaries, books, and online communities, often presenting themselves as suppressed knowledge that establishment science refuses to acknowledge. Hypothetical continents are massive landmasses that various researchers and theorists have claimed once existed, but have since vanished beneath the oceans. These proposed continents go far beyond the well-documented cases of actual sunken lands, instead suggesting entire civilizations and ecosystems that mainstream geology insists never existed. Lemuria stands as perhaps the most scientifically rooted of these claims. British zoologist Philip Sclater proposed this Indian Ocean continent in 1864 to explain why lemur fossils appeared in both Madagascar and India, but nowhere in between. Before scientists understood plate tectonics, a land bridge seemed like the only logical explanation for this distribution pattern. The continent of Mu takes things considerably further. Colonel James Churchward spent decades in the early 1900s claiming this Pacific landmass housed 64 million people before sinking 12,000 years ago. According to Churchward, Mu stretched from Hawaii to Easter Island and served as the birthplace of human civilization. He insisted that ancient tablets he discovered in India contained the complete history of this lost world, though he never produced these tablets for scientific examination. Hyperborea represents the mythological end of this spectrum. Ancient Greek texts describe this northern continent as a paradise beyond the north wind, where the sun never set and people lived for 1,000 years. Certain 20th century occultists transformed Hyperborea from classical mythology into pseudo-historical fact, claiming it as the original homeland of a superior race. Modern geology has systematically dismantled these continental claims. Plate tectonic theory explains lemur distribution through continental drift rather than sunken land bridges. Ocean floor mapping reveals no evidence of massive sunken continents in the Pacific or elsewhere. The seafloor shows clear patterns of spreading and subduction that account for current continental positions without requiring lost landmasses. Yet these hypothetical continents persist in fringe theories, often linked to claims about advanced ancient civilizations, extraterrestrial contact, or hidden human origins. The appeal lies partly in their grand scale. Entire continents offer enough space for any imaginable lost civilization or forgotten technology. Fad diets are temporary eating plans that promise rapid weight loss through extreme restrictions or unusual food combinations. These diets typically claim to work through secret mechanisms that mainstream nutrition science supposedly ignores. The cabbage soup diet emerged in the 1980s, instructing followers to consume nothing but a specific vegetable soup for 7 days straight. Believers claimed the soup possessed fat-burning properties that could eliminate 8 to 10 pounds in a single week. The diet resurfaced every few years with slight variations, sometimes called the Sacred Heart diet or the military diet. The grapefruit diet dates back to the 1930s and centers on the idea that grapefruits contain special enzymes that dissolve fat when eaten before meals. Followers eat half a grapefruit with every meal while drastically cutting calories. Despite decades of popularity, no such fat-burning enzymes have ever been identified in citrus fruits. Dr. Peter Diademo popularized the blood type diet in 1996, claiming that people should eat based on their ABO blood group. Type O individuals supposedly thrive on meat like ancient hunters, while Type A people need vegetarian diets like early farmers. Diademo provided no peer-reviewed evidence for these evolutionary dietary connections. The Master Cleanse or lemonade diet requires drinking only a mixture of lemon juice, maple syrup, cayenne pepper, and water for 10 to 14 days. Created by Stanley Burroughs in the 1940s, the cleanse allegedly removes toxins while melting away pounds. Celebrities like Beyoncé brought renewed attention to the practice in the 2000s. Perhaps the most extreme example is breatharianism, which claims humans can survive on air and sunlight alone, eliminating the need for food entirely. Wiley Brooks founded the Breatharian Institute and charged thousands of dollars for seminars teaching these techniques. Multiple deaths have been linked to attempts at prolonged fasting based on breatharian principles. The alkaline diet insists that certain foods make blood more acidic, leading to disease and weight gain. Followers avoid acidic foods like meat and dairy while consuming alkaline foods like leafy greens. This ignores the fact that human blood maintains a stable pH regardless of diet, and dramatic pH changes would be fatal. These diets share common features that reveal their pseudoscientific nature. They promise unrealistic results in impossibly short time frames, often claiming to bypass the basic principle that weight loss requires burning more calories than consumed. Many invoke mysterious biological mechanisms that conveniently cannot be measured or verified. The temporary weight loss that followers experience typically comes from water loss and reduced calorie intake rather than any special properties of the prescribed foods. When normal eating resumes, the weight returns just as quickly as it disappeared. Tomato is a fruit, despite what grocery stores and dinner conversations might have you believe. This botanical truth sits at the foundation of one of the most widespread culinary misconceptions in modern society. The confusion stems from a landmark 1893 Supreme Court case, Nix versus Hedden, where the United States government legally declared tomatoes to be vegetables for tariff purposes. The court acknowledged that botanically tomatoes are fruits, but ruled that in common language they function as vegetables in meals. From a scientific standpoint, tomatoes meet every requirement for fruit classification. They develop from the flower of the plant and contain seeds, just like apples, oranges, and strawberries. The botanical definition hinges on reproductive function rather than taste or culinary use. This knowledge becomes even more interesting when you realize that by the same logic, cucumbers, peppers, eggplants, and even corn kernels are technically fruits. Meanwhile, rhubarb, which we commonly treat as a fruit in desserts, is actually a vegetable since we eat the leaf stalks rather than the seed-bearing portion. The tomato fruit classification extends beyond mere semantics. Plant breeders and agricultural scientists rely on this understanding to develop new varieties and improve growing techniques. When you understand that you're harvesting the reproductive organs of the tomato plant, cultivation practices suddenly make more sense. Perhaps the most amusing aspect is watching people's reactions when this fact comes up at dinner parties. The same individuals confidently calling tomatoes vegetables will happily agree that botanically, nuts are actually seeds, and strawberries aren't technically berries. Coffee enemas are exactly what they sound like. The practice of introducing coffee solution directly into the colon through the rectum. Advocates claim this procedure can detoxify the liver, boost energy levels, cure cancer, and even reverse aging. The theory centers around caffeine absorption through the colon walls, supposedly stimulating bile production and causing the liver to release stored toxins. The practice gained mainstream attention through Max Gerson, a German physician who developed the Gerson therapy in the 1930s. His treatment protocol required patients to perform up to 5 coffee enemas daily as part of an intensive detoxification regimen. Gerson believed that cancer resulted from toxin buildup, and that coffee enemas could flush these poisons from the body. Modern practitioners often reference palmitic acid, a compound found in coffee that allegedly increases glutathione production in the liver. They claim this creates a powerful detox effect that regular coffee consumption cannot achieve, since the digestive system would neutralize these beneficial compounds. The procedure typically involves brewing organic coffee, cooling it to body temperature, and using an enema kit to introduce 1 to 2 liters of the solution. Practitioners recommend retaining the liquid for 12 to 15 minutes before release, allowing maximum absorption time. Celebrity endorsements have kept the practice alive, with various wellness influencers promoting coffee enemas as morning routines or cleansing rituals. Some alternative cancer clinics still incorporate daily coffee enemas into their treatment protocols, despite lacking scientific validation. The coffee enema community has developed elaborate preparation rituals, specific coffee bean recommendations, and detailed timing schedules that give the practice an almost ceremonial quality. Craniosacral therapy is a hands-on treatment where practitioners claim they can feel and manipulate an invisible rhythm pulsing through your skull at 6 to 12 beats per minute. This supposed rhythm reflects the production and absorption of cerebrospinal fluid, the clear liquid that bathes your brain and spinal cord. The practice emerged from osteopath William Sutherland in the early 1900s, who became convinced that skull bones moved in a breathing-like pattern. Decades later, John Upledger refined these ideas in the 1970s, developing a system where therapists use touches lighter than the weight of a nickel to detect disturbances in this cranial rhythm. Practitioners train extensively to develop what they call palpation skills, spending years learning to feel these subtle pulsations through skin, muscle, and bone. They claim this rhythm reveals everything from emotional trauma stored in tissues to structural imbalances affecting the entire nervous system. The therapy session involves lying fully clothed while a practitioner places their hands on various points along your head, spine, and pelvis. They report feeling restrictions, asymmetries, and energy blocks that guide their treatment approach. Sessions can last 45 minutes to an hour. With practitioners making minute adjustments, they believe release these restrictions. Upledger expanded the technique beyond physical symptoms, claiming craniosacral therapy could address autism, attention deficit disorder, chronic fatigue, and post-traumatic stress. His somato-emotional release technique supposedly helps patients access and process buried emotional experiences through gentle touch. When researchers tested multiple craniosacral therapists on the same patients, they detected completely different rhythms and restrictions. Some felt rhythms of 8 cycles per minute, while others detected 15 cycles per minute on identical subjects. The forces involved are so gentle that biomechanical studies question whether they could possibly move skull bones or affect cerebrospinal fluid flow. Despite these findings, craniosacral therapy training programs operate worldwide, teaching thousands of practitioners annually. The technique has spawned numerous variations and remains popular in alternative medicine circles, with many patients reporting profound relaxation and symptom relief following sessions. Detoxification is a multi-billion-dollar industry built on the premise that your body accumulates harmful toxins that need to be actively removed through special diets, supplements, or procedures. These programs promise to cleanse everything from heavy metals to mysterious environmental pollutants, often without specifying exactly which toxins they target or how they supposedly eliminate them. The human body already operates sophisticated detoxification systems 24 hours a day. Your liver processes and neutralizes harmful substances. Your kidneys filter waste from blood. Your lungs expel carbon dioxide, and your skin releases toxins through sweat. These organs evolved over millions of years specifically for this purpose. Popular detox methods range from juice cleanses and activated charcoal supplements to ionic foot baths that claim to draw toxins through your feet, turning the water murky colors as supposed proof of purification. Colon hydrotherapy practitioners insert tubes to flush the intestines with gallons of water, claiming to remove years of accumulated waste. Master Cleanse followers consume only lemon juice, maple syrup, and cayenne pepper for 10 to 40 days. Chelation therapy advocates inject chemicals like EDTA to bind and remove metals from blood, despite serious risks including kidney damage. The Federal Trade Commission has repeatedly fined companies for unsubstantiated detox claims. In 2017, they settled with Kanoki footpad manufacturers for over $30 million after the company claimed their patches could remove toxins while users slept. Many detox programs actually stress the body's natural systems rather than supporting them. Extreme fasting can lead to muscle loss, electrolyte imbalances, and metabolic slowdown. Some detox teas contain powerful laxatives that cause dehydration and dependency. The detox industry thrives on scientific-sounding language without scientific backing, capitalizing on legitimate concerns about environmental pollution, while offering solutions that range from ineffective to potentially dangerous. Ear candling is a practice that involves inserting a hollow candle into your ear canal and lighting the other end on fire. The burning candle supposedly creates a vacuum that draws out earwax, toxins, and even negative energy from deep within your head. The process takes about 15 to 30 minutes per ear. Afterwards, practitioners cut open the remaining candle to reveal a dark, waxy residue inside the hollow tube. This material gets presented as proof that the treatment worked, with claims that pounds of ancient earwax and mysterious toxins have been extracted from the patient's ears. The technique has roots in traditional medicine from various cultures, including the Hopi tribe of Arizona, though many Hopi representatives have stated they never actually used this practice. Modern ear candling gained popularity in the 1990s through alternative health circles and spa treatments. Believers claim the method can cure everything from chronic headaches and sinus infections to hearing loss and brain fog. Some even suggest it removes spiritual blockages and improves mental clarity. The visual evidence seems convincing when you see that dark residue pulled from the candle. However, testing reveals that identical residue appears even when the candle burns without being near anyone's ear. The dark material comes entirely from the burning candle itself, not from the patient's ear canal. Multiple studies using microscopic analysis found no earwax or bodily substances in the extracted material. The Food and Drug Administration has issued warnings about ear candling after documented cases of burns, punctured eardrums, and candle wax blocking ear canals. Some patients required surgery to remove melted wax that dripped into their ears during the procedure. Despite scientific debunking and safety warnings, ear candling remains popular at spas and alternative health clinics worldwide, with practitioners continuing to charge $50 to $100 per session for what amounts to an expensive and potentially dangerous placebo. Earthing therapy is the practice of making direct skin contact with the Earth's surface to supposedly absorb healing electrons from the ground beneath your feet. Walking barefoot on grass, lying directly on sand, or even using specially designed conductive mats indoors are all considered forms of earthing. The theory centers around the idea that modern life disconnects us from the Earth's natural electrical field. Earthing enthusiasts claim that our bodies accumulate positive electrical charge from electronics, synthetic materials, and elevated living spaces. According to this belief, the Earth maintains a limitless supply of free electrons with a negative charge that can neutralize this supposed electrical imbalance. Clint Ober, a former cable television executive, popularized earthing in the late 1990s after noticing that people wearing rubber-soled shoes might be insulated from the Earth's electrical field. His personal experiments led him to develop the first earthing products and conduct preliminary studies on their effects. Earthing practitioners report dramatic improvements in sleep quality, reduced inflammation, faster wound healing, and decreased stress levels within days or weeks of regular practice. Some claim it helps with chronic pain conditions, autoimmune disorders, and even jet lag recovery. The earthing industry has grown to include grounding mats for office workers, conductive bed sheets that plug into wall outlets, and earthing patches that attach to specific body parts. These products typically connect to the ground port of electrical outlets or metal stakes placed in soil outside homes. Several small-scale studies have measured changes in cortisol levels, heart rate variability, and inflammatory markers in people using earthing techniques. However, the research often involves small sample sizes and lacks the rigorous controls that mainstream medicine requires for accepting new treatments. Critics point out that any benefits might simply come from increased time outdoors, physical activity, or the relaxation associated with natural settings rather than electron transfer from the Earth. Energy medicine is a collection of healing practices that claim to manipulate invisible energy fields flowing through and around the human body. Practitioners believe these energy systems, known by names like chi, prana, or biofields, can be adjusted to treat everything from chronic pain to emotional trauma. The field gained significant traction in the 1970s when acupuncturist James Oschman began publishing research on what he called the living matrix, a supposed network of connective tissue that carries electrical signals throughout the body. His work suggested that practitioners could detect and redirect these energies using their hands, crystals, or specialized devices. Reiki master Mikao Usui developed one of the most popular forms in early 20th century Japan, teaching students to channel universal life force energy through their palms. Modern Reiki sessions involve practitioners hovering their hands inches above a patient's body, claiming to sense blockages and redirect energy flow without any physical contact. Barbara Brennan, a former NASA physicist turned energy healer, created detailed maps of what she called the human energy field in her 1987 book, Hands of Light. Her diagrams show 7 layers of colored energy surrounding the body, each corresponding to different physical and emotional states. The practice extends into high-tech territory with devices like the SCIO machine, which claims to measure quantum resonance frequencies and deliver healing vibrations. These units can cost upwards of $20,000 and allegedly scan thousands of energy frequencies in minutes. Perhaps most remarkably, some energy medicine practitioners claim they can work on patients from thousands of kilometers away through what they call distant healing or remote transmission sessions. Facilitated communication is a method where a helper physically supports the arm or hand of someone with communication difficulties while they type messages on a keyboard or point to letters on a board. The technique emerged from Australia in the 1970s when educator Rosemary Crossley began working with people who had cerebral palsy and intellectual disabilities. She claimed that by providing just the right amount of physical support, these individuals could suddenly express complex thoughts and emotions that nobody knew they possessed. The method exploded in popularity during the early 1990s when Douglas Bicklin brought it to Syracuse University. Bicklin documented seemingly miraculous breakthroughs where nonverbal individuals with autism began typing sophisticated poetry, personal reflections, and detailed accounts of their inner lives. Parents and educators were amazed as people previously thought to have severe cognitive limitations suddenly demonstrated grade-level literacy and philosophical insights. However, controlled scientific studies revealed a troubling pattern. When facilitators couldn't see the questions being asked, the typed responses became nonsensical or completely unrelated. When shown different images than their communication partners, the individuals would describe what the facilitators saw, not what appeared on their own screens. The method sparked intense legal controversies when some facilitated messages contained accusations of abuse against family members and caregivers. These cases led to criminal investigations and family separations before the communications were determined to be inadvertently influenced by the facilitators themselves. Despite multiple studies demonstrating that facilitators unconsciously guide the typing, some practitioners continue using modified versions of the technique, now often called supported typing or rapid prompting method. Chromotherapy is the belief that exposing the human body to specific colors can cure diseases and improve mental health. Practitioners claim that red light boosts energy and circulation, blue light calms anxiety and lowers blood pressure, while green light supposedly balances the entire system. The theory operates on the premise that each color vibrates at a unique frequency that resonates with different organs and emotional states. A chromotherapy session might involve sitting under colored LED panels for 20 to 30 minutes, drinking water that has been charged under colored glass, or even wearing specific colored clothing throughout the day. Dr. Edwin Babbitt popularized modern chromotherapy in the 1870s with his book, The Principles of Light and Color, where he detailed using red light to stimulate blood flow and blue light to reduce inflammation. He constructed elaborate contraptions with colored glass filters and mirrors to direct healing light onto patients. Contemporary chromotherapy centers offer treatments for everything from seasonal depression to digestive issues. The spectrochrome system, developed by Dinsha Gadiali in the early 1900s, assigned specific colors to treat over 300 different ailments using precisely timed light exposures. Some practitioners combine chromotherapy with crystal healing, claiming that placing colored gemstones on chakra points amplifies the therapeutic effects. Ruby red for the root chakra, sapphire blue for the throat chakra, each stone supposedly channeling its color's healing frequency directly into the body's energy centers. The practice has found its way into mainstream wellness, with chromotherapy saunas and colored light therapy rooms appearing in luxury spas worldwide, though the scientific community maintains that any benefits likely stem from relaxation rather than the colors themselves. Faith healing is the practice of attempting to cure physical ailments through prayer, spiritual intervention, or claimed divine power rather than conventional medicine. Practitioners believe they can channel supernatural forces to eliminate everything from chronic pain to terminal cancer through methods like laying on of hands, anointing with oils, or conducting intensive prayer sessions. The modern faith healing movement gained massive popularity through televangelists like Oral Roberts, who claimed to have healed over 1 million people during his ministry. Roberts famously built a medical school and hospital in Tulsa, insisting that combining prayer with medicine would create revolutionary healing outcomes. The facility closed after burning through hundreds of millions of dollars. Benny Hinn became one of the most recognizable faith healers, filling stadiums with believers seeking miraculous cures. His crusades feature dramatic moments where people abandon wheelchairs or claim their tumors have vanished instantly. Hinn's ministry has generated over $100 million in donations, despite investigations finding little evidence of lasting medical improvements among attendees. Peter Popoff gained notoriety in the 1980s when investigators discovered he was using a hidden radio earpiece to receive information about audience members from his wife backstage. This allowed him to appear supernaturally informed about strangers' medical conditions and personal details. Even after this exposure, Popoff returned to prominence and continues operating a multi-million-dollar ministry. The practice involves various techniques depending on religious tradition. Pentecostal healers often speak in tongues while touching affected body parts. Catholic healing masses focus on intercession through saints and blessed objects. New Age practitioners might use crystals or energy manipulation techniques they claim realign spiritual frequencies within the body. Medical researchers have documented temporary improvements in some faith healing participants, typically attributing these to placebo effects, temporary relief from stress-related symptoms, or misdiagnosis of the original condition. However, documented cases exist where individuals died after abandoning prescribed treatments in favor of prayer-based healing, leading to legal prosecutions for negligent homicide in several jurisdictions. The practice raises complex questions about the intersection of religious freedom and medical responsibility, particularly when parents choose faith healing over conventional treatment for seriously ill children. Functional medicine is a medical approach that claims to treat the root causes of illness rather than just managing symptoms. Practitioners spend hours with patients, diving deep into their medical history, lifestyle, and environmental exposures to create personalized treatment plans that can cost thousands of dollars and aren't covered by most insurance. The field emerged in the 1990s when biochemist Jeffrey Bland began promoting the idea that conventional medicine was failing patients by treating diseases in isolation rather than viewing the body as an interconnected system. Functional medicine doctors often order extensive laboratory panels testing everything from heavy metal levels to food sensitivities, sometimes running 50 to 100 different markers in a single visit. These comprehensive tests frequently reveal imbalances that mainstream medicine considers normal variations. A patient might be told their chronic fatigue stems from adrenal dysfunction, methylation defects, or leaky gut syndrome, conditions that many conventional physicians don't recognize as legitimate diagnoses. Treatment protocols typically involve expensive supplement regimens, elimination diets, and detoxification programs. Patients often report dramatic improvements after months of following these complex protocols, though critics argue these results could stem from the placebo effect or simply paying closer attention to health and lifestyle factors. The Institute for Functional Medicine has trained over 100,000 practitioners worldwide, creating a parallel healthcare system that operates largely outside traditional medical oversight. While some functional medicine concepts like personalized nutrition and the gut-brain connection have gained acceptance in mainstream medicine, the field remains controversial for its reliance on unproven diagnostic methods and treatments that lack rigorous clinical trial support. Health bracelets are wearable accessories that claim to provide medical benefits through various mechanisms ranging from magnetic fields to mystical energy frequencies. These products burst into mainstream popularity during the late 2000s and early 2010s, with companies making bold assertions about their ability to improve balance, reduce pain, and enhance athletic performance. Magnetic therapy bracelets represent the most scientifically sounding category, with manufacturers claiming that embedded magnets increase blood circulation by attracting iron in red blood cells. The typical magnetic bracelet contains neodymium magnets ranging from 800 to 3,000 Gauss in strength, which sellers insist can penetrate deep enough into tissue to provide therapeutic effects. Copper bracelets take a different approach, supposedly releasing microscopic amounts of copper into the skin to reduce arthritis inflammation. Believers point to copper's role in collagen formation and its antimicrobial properties as evidence, though dermatologists note that any copper absorption would be minimal and likely ineffective. The Power Balance bracelet became the poster child for energy-based health jewelry in 2010, featuring embedded holograms that the company claimed were programmed with specific frequencies to optimize the body's natural energy field. Professional athletes, including Shaquille O'Neal and Drew Brees, endorsed the product before the Federal Trade Commission forced the company to admit their claims lacked scientific evidence. Ion bracelets entered the market with assertions about negative ion generation, claiming these invisible particles could neutralize positive ions from electronic devices and restore the body's electrical balance. Manufacturers often incorporate materials like tourmaline or titanium, stating these elements naturally produce beneficial negative ions when in contact with body heat. Crystal and gemstone bracelets blend traditional crystal healing beliefs with modern marketing, with each stone assigned specific healing properties. Amethyst allegedly promotes mental clarity, while hematite supposedly grounds excess electrical energy in the body. Multiple controlled studies have consistently failed to demonstrate any measurable physiological effects from these devices beyond placebo responses, yet the global market for therapeutic jewelry continues to generate hundreds of millions in annual revenue. Leaky gut syndrome is a condition where the lining of the small intestine allegedly becomes damaged and overly permeable, allowing bacteria, toxins, and undigested food particles to leak directly into the bloodstream. Alternative health practitioners claim this intestinal breach triggers widespread inflammation and autoimmune responses throughout the body. The theory centers on tight junctions, microscopic proteins that seal the spaces between intestinal cells. When these junctions supposedly loosen or break down, the gut transforms from a selective barrier into what some describe as a biological sieve. This process, known medically as increased intestinal permeability, becomes the foundation for linking digestive issues to conditions ranging from arthritis to depression. Naturopathic doctors and functional medicine specialists have connected leaky gut to an impressive array of symptoms. Chronic fatigue, brain fog, skin problems, food sensitivities, and mood disorders all allegedly stem from this single intestinal malfunction. Some practitioners go further, claiming connections to autism, Crohn's disease, and even schizophrenia. The treatment protocols typically involve eliminating inflammatory foods like gluten, dairy, and sugar, while introducing expensive supplement regimens. Bone broth, probiotics, and something called L-glutamine powder feature prominently in healing protocols that can stretch across months or years. Dr. Alessio Fasano's research on zonulin, a protein that regulates intestinal permeability, provided scientific legitimacy to the concept in the early 2000s. His work demonstrated that intestinal permeability does increase in certain conditions like celiac disease and Crohn's disease. However, mainstream gastroenterologists remain skeptical about the syndrome's broader applications. They point out that increased intestinal permeability appears to be a consequence rather than a cause of inflammatory bowel diseases. The leap from documented permeability changes to the vast symptom lists promoted by alternative practitioners lacks substantial clinical evidence. The syndrome has spawned a thriving industry of specialized diets, supplements, and testing kits that promise to identify and heal intestinal damage. The Lightning Process is a 3-day training program that promises to cure chronic fatigue syndrome, multiple sclerosis, depression, anxiety, addiction, eating disorders, and dozens of other conditions using nothing more than the power of positive thinking. Developed by British osteopath Phil Parker in the late 1990s, this expensive course costs over £1,000 in the United Kingdom and $1,700 in Australia. The lightning process claims that illnesses like chronic fatigue syndrome occur when your body gets stuck in a persistent stress response. According to Parker, while this disruption initially happens at an unconscious level, patients can exert conscious control over the process and break the cycle. The training combines elements from neuro-linguistic programming, life coaching, and osteopathy into what critics describe as an expensive placebo wrapped in pseudoscientific jargon. Parker himself has an interesting background. He was once a teacher on a course that claimed to teach people how to heal illnesses using spirit guides and tarot cards. The process has made some dramatic claims about its effectiveness, with at least one practitioner's website claiming it could help patients achieve full recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome with no possibility of relapse, no matter how severe their symptoms. The lightning process operates with characteristics that mirror multi-level marketing schemes. Practitioners pay Phil Parker to become licensed trainers and run their own businesses. These coaches typically share a similar story about having chronic fatigue syndrome, but getting cured by the lightning process. They flood Parker's YouTube videos with positive comments and spread their recovery stories on online patient forums, creating artificial social proof to lure in desperate patients. The Advertising Standards Authority has ruled against Parker and his companies multiple times, stating that his websites gave misleading impressions that the lightning process could cure or treat chronic fatigue syndrome and other conditions. A survey of over 4,000 people carried out by the ME Association found that over a fifth of those who tried the lightning process were made worse, with nearly 13% reporting they were much worse after the treatment. Perhaps most disturbing is the program's approach to treatment failure. Critics note that if patients get better, the lightning process claims success, but if they don't improve, the patient is blamed for not applying the techniques correctly. This victim-blaming approach has had tragic consequences. In 2011, a 13-year-old Norwegian boy with chronic fatigue syndrome attempted self-removal after he failed to improve with the lightning process. Despite nearly 3 decades of existence, the lightning process has never been tested with randomized controlled trials. The only studies conducted involved tiny sample sizes with no control groups. As Dr. Charles Shepard from the ME Association put it, if the lightning process can truly treat and restore people with depression, multiple sclerosis, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and dozens of other conditions in just 3 days, it would be Nobel Prize material and save healthcare systems billions. Instead, it remains what skeptics call an expensive exercise in victim blaming, disguised as cutting-edge mind-body medicine. Neurolinguistic programming is a collection of techniques that claims to reprogram human behavior through specific language patterns and behavioral modeling. Created in the 1970s by Richard Bandler and John Grinder at the University of California, NLP promises to unlock the hidden codes of human communication and thought processes. The system centers around the idea that successful people have learnable patterns of behavior and thinking that can be copied and installed in others. Practitioners study everything from body language to speech patterns, claiming they can model anyone from world-class athletes to master therapists and transfer those skills to their clients. One of NLP's most distinctive features involves eye-accessing cues, where practitioners believe they can determine how someone processes information by watching which direction their eyes move. Looking up and to the right supposedly indicates visual construction, while down and to the left suggests internal dialogue. These patterns form the basis for what NLP calls reading people's internal mental strategies. The technique of anchoring involves linking specific physical touches or sounds to desired emotional states. A practitioner might touch a client's shoulder while they recall a moment of confidence, then later trigger that same feeling by repeating the touch. Advanced practitioners claim they can install complex behavioral changes in minutes Using these anchoring techniques combined with specific language patterns, NLP gained massive popularity in sales training and personal development circles during the 1980s and 1990s. Companies like Xerox and the United States Army experimented with NLP training programs, while figures like Tony Robbins built empires around modified NLP techniques. The field attracts controversy partly due to its grand claims about rapid therapeutic results. Some NLP practitioners advertise single-session phobia cures or promise to eliminate limiting beliefs in under an hour. These bold assertions, combined with limited peer-reviewed research supporting NLP's effectiveness, have earned it skepticism from mainstream psychology. Despite this, NLP continues to influence fields from therapy to marketing, with practitioners claiming they can detect deception, influence decisions, and even cure trauma through carefully crafted conversations and behavioral interventions. Magnet therapy is the practice of using static magnetic fields to treat pain, improve circulation, and cure various ailments. Believers claim that strategically placed magnets can realign the body's natural magnetic field and boost healing processes. The therapy centers around products embedded with permanent magnets. Magnetic bracelets promise to relieve arthritis pain within days. Mattress pads lined with magnets supposedly improve sleep quality and reduce chronic back pain. Shoe insoles containing magnets claim to increase energy levels and improve balance. Some practitioners even sell magnetic water devices that allegedly restructure H2O molecules for better hydration. The proposed mechanism involves the iron content in human blood. Supporters argue that magnets create fields strong enough to influence red blood cells, increasing circulation and oxygen delivery to tissues. They point to the fact that iron is indeed magnetic, so the logic seems sound on the surface. Dr. William Philpott became a major advocate in the 1970s, writing extensively about using magnets to treat depression, diabetes, and even cancer. His work helped establish the North Pole versus South Pole distinction that many magnet therapy companies still use today. North Pole magnets supposedly have calming, healing effects, while South Pole magnets energize and stimulate. The industry exploded in Japan during the 1980s, where magnetic therapy devices gained mainstream acceptance. Companies like Nikon built billion-dollar empires selling everything from magnetic jewelry to whole-house magnetic systems. Clinical trials consistently show magnet therapy performs no better than placebo treatments. The magnetic fields from these devices are far too weak to penetrate skin and affect blood flow in any meaningful way. Yet the global market continues to generate over $1 billion annually. Moxibustion is a traditional Chinese medicine technique that involves burning dried mugwort directly on or above specific points on the skin. Practitioners light cone-shaped piles of this herb, called moxa, creating intense localized heat that can reach temperatures of 130 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The practice comes in several forms, from direct moxibustion, where the burning herb touches the skin and often leaves small scars, to indirect methods using barriers like ginger slices or salt. Some practitioners use moxa sticks that look like oversized cigars, holding them inches above the skin until the area turns red. Traditional Chinese medicine theory claims moxibustion strengthens yang qi, the body's warming energy, while dispelling cold and dampness that supposedly cause illness. Practitioners target the same acupuncture points used with needles, believing the heat travels through invisible meridian channels to restore balance. Modern moxibustion enthusiasts treat everything from digestive problems and arthritis to breech pregnancies and depression. The technique gained attention in Western alternative medicine circles during the 1970s, with some hospitals now offering it alongside conventional treatments. Clinical studies have shown mixed results, with some research suggesting benefits for certain conditions like osteoarthritis pain, while other studies find no significant effects beyond placebo. The practice requires careful temperature control, as burns and infections can occur when performed incorrectly. Mugwort itself contains compounds like cineole and borneol that create the distinctive smell practitioners associate with therapeutic effects. The ritual aspect, combined with the intense sensory experience of controlled burning, creates a dramatic treatment that patients often remember long after conventional medicine fails to provide relief. Naturopathy is a system of alternative medicine that claims the human body possesses an innate ability to heal itself through natural processes. Practitioners called naturopathic doctors, or NDs, use treatments ranging from herbal remedies and homeopathy to dietary changes and hydrotherapy, often positioning themselves as primary care physicians despite lacking conventional medical training. The practice emerged in the late 1800s through figures like Benedict Lust, who established the first naturopathic college in New York. Lust promoted the idea that disease stems from violations of natural law, and that cures could be found through fasting, vegetarian diets, and exposure to fresh air and sunlight. Modern naturopathy operates on 6 core principles, including the healing power of nature and treating the whole person rather than isolated symptoms. However, these philosophical foundations often conflict with evidence-based medicine. Many naturopaths discourage or delay conventional treatments for serious conditions, leading to documented cases of preventable deaths. The regulatory landscape creates additional confusion. Only 17 U.S. states license naturopathic doctors, while others allow virtually anyone to practice under the naturopath title. Licensed NDs complete 4-year programs at accredited schools, but their training includes scientifically unsupported subjects like homeopathy and energy medicine alongside legitimate courses in anatomy and physiology. Treatment modalities vary wildly in both safety and plausibility. While some dietary and lifestyle recommendations align with mainstream health advice, others venture into dangerous territory. Chelation therapy for autism, intravenous vitamin C for cancer, and coffee enemas for detoxification represent the more extreme end of naturopathic practice. The field's relationship with vaccination particularly highlights its departure from scientific consensus. Many naturopaths express skepticism about vaccine safety and efficacy, sometimes recommending homeopathic alternatives they claim provide equivalent protection against infectious diseases. Nambudrapad's allergy elimination techniques is an alternative medicine practice that claims to permanently eliminate allergies using muscle testing and acupressure points. Developed by chiropractor Devi Nambudrapad in the 1980s, this technique combines elements from acupuncture, chiropractic manipulation, applied kinesiology, and homeopathy into what supporters call a revolutionary allergy treatment. The process begins with practitioners using muscle testing to identify alleged allergies and sensitivities. Patients hold glass vials containing allergen samples while the practitioner tests their muscle strength, believing that exposure to problem substances will cause temporary muscle weakness. Once sensitivities are identified, treatment involves lying on a table while the practitioner stimulates specific acupressure points along the spine and extremities. Patients must continue holding the allergen vial throughout this 20-minute session, with the theory being that this retrains the nervous system to no longer react to the substance. Nayat practitioners claim success treating everything from food allergies and environmental sensitivities to autism spectrum disorders and chronic fatigue syndrome. Some even assert they can treat allergies to emotions, colors, and abstract concepts like geometric shapes. The technique requires patients to avoid the treated allergen for 25 hours after each session, during which time the body supposedly integrates the new tolerance. Multiple sessions are typically needed, with practitioners often recommending treatment for basic nutrients like vitamin C and B complex vitamins before addressing specific allergens. Despite these elaborate protocols, controlled scientific studies have consistently failed to demonstrate NAET's effectiveness beyond placebo effects, leading mainstream medical organizations to classify it as pseudoscience. Orthomolecular medicine is a treatment approach that claims mental and physical diseases stem from biochemical imbalances that can be corrected through massive doses of vitamins and minerals. This concept emerged in the 1960s when Nobel Prize winner Linus Pauling coined the term arguing that the right molecules in the right concentrations could restore optimal health. The core principle revolves around megadose therapy, where patients receive vitamin and mineral supplements at levels far exceeding standard recommended daily allowances. We're talking about doses that can be 10 to 100 times higher than what most people consume through diet alone. Pauling himself became famous for advocating vitamin C doses of 10,000 milligrams daily to prevent common colds, despite the recommended amount being just 90 milligrams for adults. His personal routine reportedly included taking 18,000 milligrams of vitamin C every day until his death at age 93. Orthomolecular practitioners target conditions ranging from schizophrenia and depression to autism and attention deficit disorders. They often prescribe combinations of B vitamins, particularly niacin in doses that can cause intense flushing sensations, along with zinc, magnesium, and omega fatty acids. Dr. Abram Hoffer pioneered using niacin therapy for schizophrenia in the 1950s, claiming remarkable success rates. His patients would receive niacin doses of 3,000 to 18,000 milligrams daily, causing dramatic skin reactions that Hoffer viewed as therapeutic indicators. The medical establishment remains skeptical, citing insufficient evidence for most orthomolecular claims and warning about potential toxicity from vitamin overdoses. Yet thousands of practitioners worldwide continue treating patients with these high-dose protocols, creating a parallel medical system that operates largely outside conventional healthcare. Therapeutic touch is a healing practice that claims to manipulate invisible energy fields surrounding the human body without ever making physical contact. Developed in the 1970s by nursing professor Dolores Krieger and psychic healer Diva Kunz, this technique centers on the belief that trained practitioners can detect disruptions in a person's energy field simply by hovering their hands 2 to 4 inches above the body. The practitioners then claim to smooth out these energy blockages, promoting healing and reducing pain. The process involves 3 main steps. First, the practitioner enters a meditative state called centering. Next comes the assessment phase, where they slowly move their hands over the patient's body, supposedly feeling for temperature changes, tingling sensations, or areas of congestion in the energy field. Finally, they perform the treatment by redirecting this energy flow using sweeping hand motions. What makes this particularly noteworthy is that therapeutic touch became widely accepted in nursing education, with over 100 colleges and universities teaching the technique by the 1990s. Thousands of nurses worldwide received certification in this practice, and it was used in hospitals across the United States. The entire foundation crumbled in 1998 when 9-year-old Emily Rosa conducted a simple experiment for her 4th grade science fair. She tested 21 therapeutic touch practitioners by having them place their hands through holes in a cardboard screen. Rosa would then randomly place her hand above one of theirs, and the practitioners had to detect which hand was receiving her energy field. The results were devastating. The practitioners identified the correct hand only 44% of the time, which is worse than random guessing. Rosa's study was later published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, making her the youngest person ever to publish research in this prestigious medical journal. Osteopathic manipulative medicine is a hands-on treatment approach that claims the human body contains an innate ability to heal itself through manual manipulation of muscles, bones, and connective tissues. Founded in 1874 by Andrew Taylor Still, this practice emerged from Still's belief that many diseases stemmed from problems in the musculoskeletal system. Still developed his theories after losing 3 children to spinal meningitis, leading him to reject conventional medicine of his era and create what he called a new science of healing. The core philosophy centers on 4 key principles. The body functions as a unified whole, possesses self-regulating mechanisms, maintains a relationship between structure and function, and responds to rational treatment based on these concepts. Practitioners use their hands to feel for what they describe as somatic dysfunction, areas where tissues feel restricted, asymmetrical, or tender. Treatment techniques range from gentle pressure and stretching to high-velocity thrusts that produce audible joint pops. Some practitioners employ craniosacral therapy, which involves applying light pressure to the skull and spine to allegedly influence cerebrospinal fluid flow. Others use visceral manipulation, claiming to treat internal organs through abdominal massage. The field split into two camps during the early 1900s. One group embraced scientific medicine and integrated with mainstream healthcare, while another maintained Still's original mystical concepts about energy flow and spiritual healing. Modern osteopathic physicians in the United States receive training equivalent to medical doctors, yet they still learn these manipulative techniques alongside conventional treatments. The contrast creates an unusual situation where the same practitioner might prescribe antibiotics in one room, then perform spinal manipulation, claiming to boost immune function in the next. Critics point out that while some techniques show evidence for treating back pain, many broader claims lack scientific support. The notion that spinal adjustments can treat asthma, ear infections, or digestive problems remains controversial within evidence-based medicine circles. Reflexology is a practice that claims your feet contain a complete map of your entire body. Practitioners believe that applying pressure to specific points on the soles of your feet can heal organs and systems located anywhere from your brain to your bladder. The theory suggests that invisible energy pathways connect every toe and heel section to distant body parts through what reflexologists call reflex zones. According to reflexology charts, your big toe supposedly controls your head and neck, while the arch of your foot manages your digestive system. Press the right spot near your pinky toe, and reflexologists claim you can treat shoulder problems. The practice extends beyond feet to include hands and ears, each supposedly containing their own miniature body maps. Eunice Ingham popularized modern reflexology in the 1930s after studying the work of physician William Fitzgerald, who developed zone therapy. Ingham created detailed foot charts that reflexologists still use today, mapping out precise locations where thumb pressure allegedly triggers healing responses throughout the body. The practice gained mainstream attention when reflexologist Kevin Kunz claimed that a 10-minute foot massage could provide the same stress relief as a 35-minute full-body massage. Some reflexologists go further, suggesting their technique can address everything from diabetes to depression by manipulating the correct pressure points. Modern reflexology sessions typically last 45 to 60 minutes and can cost anywhere from $50 to $150. The lack of anatomical evidence for energy pathways connecting feet to organs hasn't deterred millions of believers worldwide. Reflexology remains popular in spas and alternative medicine clinics, where practitioners confidently press specific foot zones while clients hope for healing that medical science says shouldn't be possible. The Tomatis method is an alternative therapy that claims to retrain the brain through specially filtered music and sounds. French ENT doctor Alfred Tomatis developed this approach in the 1950s after observing opera singers who lost their ability to hear certain frequencies. Tomatis believed that many learning disabilities, behavioral problems, and developmental issues stem from poor listening skills rather than hearing problems. His theory centered on the idea that the ear develops in the womb and continues shaping brain function throughout life. According to Tomatis, when someone cannot properly process certain sound frequencies, it creates cascading problems with attention, language, and emotional regulation. The treatment involves sitting in a special room wearing headphones that play filtered classical music, particularly Mozart compositions. The electronic ear device, as Tomatis called it, removes and emphasizes specific frequencies while adding unexpected delays and interruptions. Sessions typically last 2 hours, and patients might need anywhere from 60 to 200 hours of treatment spread across several intensive blocks. Practitioners claim the method can treat autism, attention deficit disorder, dyslexia, depression, and even help with foreign language learning. Some centers charge thousands of dollars for complete programs, marketing to desperate parents seeking alternatives for children with developmental challenges. The filtering process supposedly mimics sounds heard in the womb, gradually retraining the ear and brain to process audio information more effectively. Tomatis argued that high-frequency sounds, particularly around 8,000 Hz, stimulate the brain and improve cognitive function. Despite decades of use in clinics worldwide, rigorous scientific studies have consistently failed to demonstrate benefits beyond placebo effects. The underlying neurological claims about frequency-specific brain stimulation lack supporting evidence from modern neuroscience research. Wind turbine syndrome is a collection of health symptoms that some people claim to develop when living near wind farms. The condition was named and popularized by Dr. Nina Pierpont, a Johns Hopkins-trained pediatrician who self-published a book on the subject in 2009. Pierpont's list of alleged symptoms reads like a medical textbook gone wild. Her original research documented everything from headaches and sleep problems to tinnitus, heart palpitations, and difficulty concentrating. But the scope has expanded dramatically since then. Researchers have now counted an astonishing 247 different symptoms attributed to wind turbines, ranging from back pain and accelerated aging to herpes and multiple sclerosis. The theory centers on infrasound, which refers to sound waves below the normal range of human hearing at 20 Hz. Pierpont argued that the low-frequency noise and vibrations generated by spinning turbine blades disrupt the inner ear's balance system, triggering a cascade of health problems throughout the body. She claimed these effects could occur up to 1.25 miles away from the turbines. Pierpont conducted her research by interviewing 23 people over the phone, recruited through anti-wind energy groups. She accepted statements about an additional 15 household members without speaking to them directly. Her husband, Calvin Luther Martin, happens to be an anti-wind activist who criticizes both the economics and physics of wind power. The most famous case involves Sue Hobart from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. In the summer of 2010, 3 wind turbines were erected in her town, with one running around the clock just 1,600 feet from her home. Hobart reported developing severe headaches, chest fluttering at night, and sleep disturbances. A Harvard Medical School doctor diagnosed her with wind turbine syndrome in 2011. She noticed her symptoms disappeared when she traveled away from home to San Diego or New Hampshire. Hobart and dozens of other residents filed lawsuits against the wind farm operators. The 3 turbines in question stood 400 feet tall and generated 163 megawatts each. In 2021, a French court sided with a Belgian couple who claimed 6 wind turbines located 700 meters from their home caused headaches, insomnia, heart irregularities, depression, dizziness, tinnitus, and nausea from noises they described as comparable to a washing machine continually turning. The scientific community has not embraced these claims. Wind turbine syndrome appears in no international disease classification system and cannot be found in any title or abstract in the United States National Library of Medicine's PubMed database. Multiple government health reviews in Massachusetts, Ontario, Australia, and other jurisdictions have found no credible evidence linking wind turbines to the reported health effects. Critics point out that Pierpont's research methodology was severely flawed. She had no control group, relied entirely on phone interviews, and selected participants through groups already opposed to wind energy. Her work was never subjected to proper peer review, despite claims to the contrary. When she attempted to serve as an expert witness at a 2013 wind farm hearing in Ontario, officials questioned her credentials and methodology. The distribution of reported cases tells an interesting story. Health complaints correlate strongly with media coverage of wind turbine syndrome itself, rather than with the actual presence or absence of wind farms. This pattern suggests what researchers call the nocebo effect, where the expectation of harm can trigger real symptoms even without a direct physical cause. Pierpont has since expanded her theory beyond wind turbines. She now claims that people suffer identical symptoms from living near natural gas compressor stations, industrial sewage pumping stations, industrial air conditioners, and other power plants. In each case, she points to low-frequency noise and infrasound as the culprit, essentially describing wind turbine syndrome without the turbines. The Wabra Foundation, an Australian organization funded by fossil fuel interests, has been identified among the groups promoting wind turbine syndrome concepts. This has led some observers to view the phenomenon as part of organized resistance to renewable energy development rather than a genuine medical condition. Recent controlled studies have directly tested the claims. In 2025, researchers exposed participants to actual wind turbine recordings alongside regular road traffic noise. They found no notable drop in attention and no spike in mental stress when people listened to turbine sounds, even when the participants remained unaware of the noise source. Affirmative prayer is a spiritual practice that flips traditional prayer on its head by declaring desired outcomes as already accomplished rather than asking for divine intervention. Instead of pleading, "Please heal my illness," practitioners state, "I am perfectly healthy and whole." This technique emerged from New Thought Christianity in the late 1800s, where metaphysical teachers like Ernest Holmes and Emmett Fox taught that human consciousness could directly influence physical reality. The core belief centers on the idea that doubt and desperation actually block manifestation. By affirming something as already true, practitioners claim they align their mental vibration with universal laws of attraction and creation. This supposedly bypasses the subconscious resistance that comes with traditional begging or pleading. Religious science churches and unity congregations have formalized these techniques into 5-step treatments. Practitioners begin by recognizing the presence of divine power, then unify themselves with that power, speak their affirmation as established fact, express gratitude for the already accomplished result, and finally release attachment to the outcome. Specific cases include stories of financial windfalls appearing within days of prosperity affirmations, chronic pain disappearing after health declarations, and relationship conflicts resolving following statements of harmony and peace. The practice extends beyond personal desires into what followers call scientific prayer, where groups collectively affirm outcomes for world events, natural disasters, and social issues. Some practitioners claim they've influenced weather patterns, prevented earthquakes, and even altered election results through coordinated affirmative sessions. Critics point out the lack of controlled studies and the convenient explanation that failed affirmations result from insufficient faith or hidden negative beliefs. Anthroposophic medicine is a complete medical system that treats illnesses as manifestations of spiritual imbalances, prescribing remedies made from metals heated under starlight, and cancer treatments derived from parasitic mistletoe. Developed by Austrian philosopher Rudolf Steiner in the early 1900s, this approach views the human body as having 4 distinct levels of existence. The physical body houses an etheric body responsible for life forces, an astral body governing emotions and consciousness, and an ego organization that represents the individual spirit. Practitioners diagnose patients by observing their constitutional type, determining whether they lean toward nerve sense pole disorders or metabolic limb pole imbalances. The pharmacy reads like medieval alchemy crossed with modern chemistry. Medications include ferrum phosphoricum, created by exposing iron phosphate to morning sunlight, and aurum metallicum, made from gold heated according to planetary rhythms. The most famous preparation, Iscador, extracts compounds from mistletoe growing on specific host trees, with different varieties prescribed based on whether the patient's cancer exhibits warming or cooling characteristics. Anthroposophic hospitals operate throughout Europe, particularly in Germany and Switzerland, offering conventional treatments alongside eurythmy movement therapy, rhythmic massage, and artistic therapies using watercolor painting or clay modeling. Medical students learn to perceive what Steiner called supersensible anatomy, studying how spiritual forces influence organ function and disease progression. The Goetheanum in Switzerland serves as the worldwide headquarters, training doctors who integrate traditional medical knowledge with Steiner's insights about karmic illness patterns and constitutional predispositions inherited from previous incarnations. Applied kinesiology is a diagnostic method that claims to reveal hidden health problems by testing the strength of your muscles. Developed by chiropractor George Goodhart in 1964, this practice suggests that every muscle in your body connects to specific organs, and when those organs malfunction, the corresponding muscles become weak. The process looks deceptively simple. A practitioner has you extend your arm while they press down on it, testing your resistance. They might then place a suspected allergen on your tongue, or hold a supplement bottle against your body, and repeat the test. If your muscle suddenly feels weaker, they claim this reveals everything from food allergies, to vitamin deficiencies, to emotional trauma stored in your tissues. Practitioners use this technique to diagnose conditions ranging from thyroid disorders to heavy metal poisoning. Some claim they can identify which specific supplements your body needs by testing how your muscles respond to different bottles held against your skin. Others insist they can detect past emotional traumas by the way certain muscle groups react during testing. The method has spawned numerous variations. Touch for Health uses similar muscle testing for general wellness. Behavioral kinesiology adds the claim that different emotions weaken different muscles. Some practitioners combine it with acupuncture meridian theory, insisting that muscle weakness reveals blockages in your body's energy pathways. Despite decades of use by thousands of practitioners worldwide, controlled studies consistently show that muscle testing performs no better than random chance at diagnosing actual medical conditions. The muscle weakness often attributed to health problems appears to result from subtle changes in the tester's pressure, rather than genuine diagnostic insight. This differs entirely from legitimate kinesiology, which studies human movement and exercise science through rigorous scientific methods. Aromatherapy is the practice of using essential oils extracted from plants to treat physical and psychological conditions through inhalation or topical application. While pleasant scents can certainly affect mood, the field extends far beyond simple relaxation into territory where fragrance molecules are claimed to cure everything from depression to cancer. The practice gained modern momentum through French chemist René-Maurice Gattefossé, who coined the term in 1928 after allegedly healing a burn on his hand using lavender oil. This single anecdote became the foundation for an entire industry worth over $4 billion annually. Essential oil enthusiasts make remarkable claims about these concentrated plant extracts. Frankincense oil supposedly reverses cellular damage and fights tumors. Tea tree oil is marketed as a cure for infections that would normally require antibiotics. Peppermint oil is said to treat irritable bowel syndrome, while eucalyptus oil claims to clear respiratory infections. The proposed mechanisms venture into questionable territory. Practitioners suggest that oil molecules travel through the olfactory system directly to the limbic brain, triggering specific healing responses. Some claim these compounds can cross the blood-brain barrier and alter neurotransmitter levels within minutes of inhalation. Multi-level marketing companies like doTERRA and Young Living have transformed aromatherapy into a billion-dollar empire, with distributors making medical claims that would be illegal if made by pharmaceutical companies. Internal company documents from 2015 revealed doTERRA representatives suggesting their oils could treat Ebola, autism, and dementia. The disconnect between marketing claims and scientific evidence becomes apparent when examining peer-reviewed studies. While research shows lavender may have mild calming effects, and tea tree oil possesses some antimicrobial properties, the leap to treating serious medical conditions lacks supporting data. Perhaps most concerning are cases where aromatherapy replaced conventional medical treatment, leading to preventable complications and delayed care for serious conditions. Auriculotherapy is a healing practice that claims your ear contains a complete map of your entire body. French neurologist Paul Noguier developed this technique in the 1950s after observing a patient whose back pain disappeared following a specific ear treatment by a local healer. The theory centers on the idea that your ear resembles an inverted fetus, with each section corresponding to different organs and body parts. The earlobe represents the head and brain, while the upper ear cartilage maps to your feet and legs. Practitioners insert tiny needles, apply pressure, or attach small metal pellets to specific ear points to treat conditions ranging from chronic pain to addiction. Noguier claimed he discovered this ear-body connection by using a technique called the vascular autonomic signal, where he would hold his fingers to a patient's wrist and feel for pulse changes while touching different ear areas. This pulse detection method supposedly revealed which ear points connected to problem areas in the body. Modern auriculotherapy sessions involve practitioners consulting detailed ear charts that divide the external ear into over 100 treatment points. Some use electrical devices to locate these points by measuring skin resistance, while others rely on visual examination and patient symptoms. The World Health Organization has actually recognized auriculotherapy as a legitimate treatment, though primarily for pain management and addiction. Treatment typically involves leaving tiny seeds, pellets, or semi-permanent needles in the ear for several days to weeks. Patients receive instructions to press these points multiple times daily to maintain stimulation between appointments. Balneotherapy is the practice of immersing the body in mineral-rich waters or therapeutic muds to treat disease. This ancient healing method has spawned claims that range from scientifically plausible to wildly exaggerated. Hot springs water has been touted to cure everything from kidney stones to male pattern baldness, with enthusiasts attributing near-miraculous properties to specific mineral combinations. The practice dates back to Hippocrates in 500 BC, who first documented healing with water, while Romans constructed elaborate bathhouses where citizens gathered for communal therapeutic soaking. Different mineral waters supposedly target different ailments based on their chemical composition. Sulfur-rich springs claim to reduce inflammation, lithium-laden waters promise mood improvement, and selenium-enriched baths allegedly heal skin conditions. Many mineral waters at spas are rich in particular minerals such as silica, sulfur, selenium, and radium, with each element marketed for specific therapeutic effects. The mechanism supposedly works through chemical absorption, thermal effects, and hydrostatic pressure combined. The biological mechanisms by which immersion in mineral medicinal water and the application of mud alleviate symptoms of several pathologies are still not completely understood, yet practitioners confidently prescribe specific treatments for dozens of conditions. John Harvey Kellogg, the cornflake inventor, operated a sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan in the early 1900s, where he administered questionable balneotherapy treatments, including the sinusoidal bath. This treatment produces muscular contractions in the patient that are supposed to relieve a number of symptoms by applying electric current directly to bath water. Modern research reveals mixed results. Scientific studies into the effectiveness of balneotherapy do not show that balneotherapy is effective for treating rheumatoid arthritis. There is also no evidence indicating a more effective type of bath, or that bathing is more effective than exercise, relaxation therapy, or mud packs. Most of the studies on balneotherapy have methodological flaws and are not reliable. Despite these limitations, European health systems still integrate balneotherapy into medical practice, with doctors prescribing specific mineral water treatments based on traditional classifications rather than rigorous scientific evidence. The gap between enthusiastic claims and scientific validation keeps balneotherapy suspended between alternative medicine and legitimate therapy. Biological terrain assessment is an alternative health practice that claims to reveal your body's hidden disease patterns by analyzing 3 specific measurements from your blood, saliva, and urine. Practitioners believe these readings can predict illness years before symptoms appear and guide personalized treatment protocols. The assessment centers on measuring pH levels, oxidation reduction potential, and electrical resistivity in bodily fluids. Supporters argue these 3 parameters create a complete picture of your internal biological environment, much like how soil conditions determine what plants can grow. This approach stems from 19th century French scientist Antoine Bécham's terrain theory, which directly challenged Louis Pasteur's germ theory of disease. While Pasteur focused on killing harmful microorganisms, Béchamp insisted that maintaining proper internal conditions prevents pathogens from taking hold in the first place. Modern BTA practitioners use specialized electronic devices to generate numerical readings for each fluid sample. A typical session involves collecting small amounts of blood, saliva, and first morning urine, then inserting electrodes to measure the electrical properties. The resulting numbers get plotted on charts that supposedly reveal everything from cancer risk to nutritional deficiencies. Vincent bioelectronics, developed by French engineer Louis-Claude Vincent in the 1950s, provided the technical foundation for these measurements. Vincent originally designed his system to assess water quality for municipal systems, but alternative health practitioners adapted it for human diagnostics. Clinics offering BTA often combine the testing with expensive supplement regimens tailored to correct the measured imbalances. Some practitioners claim they can track treatment progress by watching how the numbers shift over multiple visits. The scientific community has found no evidence that these electrical measurements correlate with actual health status or disease risk, noting that normal biological variation easily explains the readings practitioners interpret as meaningful patterns. Biorhythms are mathematical cycles that supposedly govern every aspect of human performance and behavior from the moment you're born until you die. This theory claims your physical strength, emotional state, and intellectual capacity all follow precise, predictable patterns that can be calculated with startling accuracy. The concept emerged from the work of Wilhelm Fliess, a German physician in the 1890s who became convinced that human life operated on 3 distinct cycles. The physical cycle runs 23 days, controlling your strength, coordination, and overall vitality. The emotional cycle spans 28 days, dictating your mood, creativity, and sensitivity. The intellectual cycle takes 33 days to complete, governing your analytical thinking, memory, and decision-making abilities. According to biorhythm believers, these cycles begin the instant you take your first breath and continue uninterrupted throughout your entire existence. When a cycle reaches its peak, you're supposedly operating at maximum capacity in that area. When it dips to its lowest point, you're at your most vulnerable. The real danger comes during critical days when cycles cross the zero line, transitioning from positive to negative or vice versa. The theory gained massive popularity during the 1970s when pocket calculators made biorhythm calculations accessible to everyone. Companies sold biorhythm charts, compatibility reports, and even wristwatches that displayed your daily readings. Some airlines reportedly used biorhythm data to schedule pilots, while athletes consulted their charts before major competitions. Biorhythm enthusiasts point to cases like the Titan submersible incident, claiming the timing aligned perfectly with negative biorhythm predictions for the crew members. They argue that understanding these cycles can prevent accidents, improve relationships, and optimize performance in everything from surgery to stock trading. The mathematics behind biorhythms creates an illusion of scientific precision, with practitioners calculating exact percentages for each cycle on any given day. This numerical complexity often convinces people that something so mathematically sophisticated must contain genuine insight into human nature.